Chapter 1399. Daoist. Daoism, Buddhism, and Diabolism had three branches. Daoism had the three pristines temple, and every Daoist lord had been the strongest among the strong. Buddhism also had Sanskrit and heavenly Luo Pao, and every Sanskrit leader and revered lord had the chance to stand at the peak of the world. However, Diabolism was the most miserable. Although Bliss Demon Palace and Sky Demon Palace were not weak, they had never stood at the peak of Daoist. The reason was not that Bliss Demon Palace and Sky Demon Palace were not weak, but that Diabolism had already suffered a blow in the lower realm 10,000 years ago. And the culprit was the supreme heavenly demon that Yuan Kongqing wanted to dig out. This person had no name, and did not even belong to a sect. When he became famous in the pugilistic world more than 10,000 years ago, he had already called himself the supreme heavenly demon, and was known as the strongest expert of Diabolism since ancient times. Of course, he wasn't bragging. At least, he wasn't bragging in the first half of his sentence. In his era, the supreme heavenly demon was the #1 demonic cultivator. Demonic sects like the Heavenly Demon Palace were almost all his subordinates. However, this supreme heavenly demon only existed for a very short time. Not long after he stood at the peak of pugilistic world, he was sealed by all the experts of the pugilistic world. The reason was simple. This supreme heavenly demon was extremely arrogant. Back then, he did not care about any sect in the pugilistic world. Not only did he offend many people with his arrogance, he even wanted to study the path of immortality, and in order to research a forbidden demonic technique, he even killed martial immortals to experiment. This kind of behavior could be said to be a great taboo in pugilistic world. How could a martial immortal who stood at the peak be slaughtered and studied wantonly? Therefore, back then, when the experts of many sects attacked together and destroyed his physical body, they found that they could not destroy his primordial spirit. Previously, the Daoist sealed Dugu Weiwei because they were afraid of Dugu Weiwei. Once he was killed, his primordial spirit would become even more terrifying after it was possessed, and could easily return to its peak strength. However, although the forbidden demonic art that the Supreme Sky Demon researched did not succeed, there was still some progress. At the very least, he succeeded in turning himself into a monster. His primordial spirit was close to being indestructible, so he could not be killed and could only be sealed. All these years, even before the great ancient calamity, the fiendish Dao had never thought of digging out a supreme sky fiend. One of the reasons was because the Daoist and Buddhist lineages were watching. Whoever wanted to dig out this lunatic would become the enemy of the entire pugilistic world. The other reason was that the Blissful Devil Palace and the Sky Devil Palace had already developed to the pinnacle of the Devil Path, and neither of them wanted to release an ancestor. But now, his Sky Demon Palace was in a difficult situation, and they coincidentally came to the lower realm and found the place where the Supreme Heavenly Demon was sealed in the past. This kind of opportunity was almost given to his Sky Demon Palace by the heavens. After discussing with Zhuqiu Liang, Yuan Kongqing decided to dig out the ruins and release the Supreme Heavenly Demon. Found it. At this time, the Sky Demon Palace martial artists below shouted in surprise. They had already dug out the bottom of the cave on the coast, revealing a palace completely made of bronze. But although it was called a palace, it was actually a square iron shell, like a coffin. There were no doors or windows, and the formation patterns of Daoist, Buddhist, and even fiendish Dao were engraved on it. Looking at the sealed palace, Yuan Kongqing felt a little uneasy in his heart. This was the last chance for his Sky Demon Palace to rise again, but in fact, he was not confident. According to the records, the power of all the big sects in the pugilistic world back then had not been able to completely destroy the Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit, causing it to be close to an indestructible state. But the problem was that indestructibility did not mean immortality. 10,000 years had passed. Who knew what it had become? Open it. Yuan Kongqing gave the order, and all the array masters of Sky Demon Palace began to prepare to break the formation. 10,000 years had passed since the Supreme Heavenly Demon was sealed in the palace. In fact, 90% of the formation on the surface had been destroyed, but the Supreme Heavenly Demon still had not taken the initiative to escape. This was not good news for Yuan Kongsheng, because it meant that the Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit had dissipated, or had become very weak. More than 10 array masters of Sky Demon Palace finished setting up the formation. In an instant, countless rays of light shrouded the bronze palace, and the formation on it began to melt. Accompanied by a creaking sound, the entire bronze palace began to crack, and a large amount of black fog spilled out. At the same time, a long sigh came from within. Finally, I see the light of day again. Yuan Kongsheng's face revealed a look of ecstasy. He had gambled correctly. The Supreme Heavenly Demon that was sealed in the palace was still alive. But before Yuan Kongsheng could say anything, the black fog began to sweep out in an instant. The surrounding array masters were all shrouded in the black fog, and in an instant, they did not even have the chance to scream, and were instantly sucked dry. Seeing this scene, Yuan Kongsheng's face darkened. Although the strength of these array masters was not strong, they were still array masters, and could not be measured by strength. Losing so many array masters at once, it could be said that the array masters that his Sky Demon Palace had accumulated for so many years had all been destroyed. At this moment, the black fog that had absorbed the blood of the array masters finally began to condense, turning into a seemingly corporeal, but erratic existence. It was a skinny old man shrouded in black fog, so skinny that he looked like a skeleton. It was very frightening. But the expression on his face was insufferably arrogant. Even Yuan Kongsheng had a feeling that the old man was looking at him as if he was looking at an ant, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. But the next moment, the Supreme Heavenly Demon waved his hand, and boundless demonic aura suddenly emerged from the void, wrapping around him. Yuan Kongsheng's expression changed abruptly. He could feel that the power was not very strong, and was only equivalent to the realm of a first heaven martial immortal. But it was precisely this weak power that drew forth the power of laws was abnormally strong, so strong that even Yuan Kongsheng, a fifth heaven martial immortal, felt threatened. The heaven-covering demonic hand was unleashed, but it was not aimed at the Supreme Heavenly Demon. Instead, it enveloped him, enduring the corrosion of the demonic aura. Yuan Kongsheng shouted, "Senior! I am a disciple of the Sky Demon Palace. Do you still remember the Sky Demon Palace?" With a wave of the Supreme Heavenly Demon's hand, the demonic aura dissipated, but the black fog around him began to boil even more violently. Sky Demon Palace? You are from the Sky Demon Palace? How long has it been? Yuan Kongsheng said carefully, it should have been more than 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, a great change occurred in the lower realms. At that time, Senior, you were already sealed, and we, before Yuan Kongsheng could finish, the Supreme Heavenly Demon interrupted him. 10,000 years? Ha ha ha. It's been 10,000 years, and I am still alive. The origin of the primordial spirit has not dissipated, and I have succeeded. Those self-righteous idiots who thought I was a madman have all turned into ashes, and I am still alive. If they had not stopped me, I would have discovered the secret of eternal life, and made my body immortal. Yuan Kongsheng was sweating profusely at this time. He suddenly felt that digging this person out seemed to be a wrong decision. No wonder those people called him a madman 10,000 years ago. In fact, the Supreme Heavenly Demon's current appearance was indeed very much like a madman. At this time, the Supreme Heavenly Demon suddenly asked, "Who is the strongest demonic cultivator in the pugilistic world now? Where is he?" Yuan Kongsheng said subconsciously, "The palace lord cannot move, so it should be the Kunlun devil cult's Chu Xiu. He should be in Eastern Qi now," but after saying this subconsciously, Yuan Kongsheng felt that something was wrong. He immediately asked warily, "Senior, what do you want to do?" "The Kunlun devil cult and my heavenly demon palace are allies, and Chu Xiu." Before he could finish, the Supreme Heavenly Demon had already turned into a black fog, and swallowed a heavenly demon palace disciple. Lend me your disciple's memory. Kid, let me out. I will not forget this merit. Whether you are Heavenly Demon Palace or Earth Demon Palace, I will make you the #1 demonic sect in the world. But the most important thing now is to find a body to possess. Besides the world's #1 demonic cultivator, who else's body is worthy of me? Don't worry, I will be back soon. After saying this, the Supreme Heavenly Demon did not give Yuan Kongqing a chance to speak, and directly rushed towards Eastern Qi. Oh no! Yuan Kongqing slapped his thigh, and his expression suddenly changed. The Supreme Heavenly Demon's speed was extremely fast, and he actually could not catch up with him. And even if he did catch up, with that person's character, he reckoned that he would not listen to him. Therefore, he could only chase as fast as he could, and only hope that that person would not cause him big trouble. To him, the Supreme Heavenly Demon was only a legendary existence, but the terrifying power of Chu Xiu was right in front of him, and he had seen it with his own eyes. At this time, within the dragon vein of Eastern Qi, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were both cultivating. As the dragon vein of Eastern Qi was the largest, the power that overflowed was also the most. Even if Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were cultivating in it at the same time, it was enough. At this time, Lu Fengxian's body was already surrounded by countless power of rules, and Chu Xiu was not cultivating, but was standing guard at the side. After a while, the power of rules that were materialized like silk threads all flowed into Lu Fengxian's body, and her aura was instantly refreshed, and her spirit soared to the sky. Lu Fengxian opened her eyes, and murmured, "Is this the power of a martial immortal? Controlling the rules, that's amazing. Brother Lu, congratulations on stepping into the martial immortal realm, and becoming a demigod. Now, you can be considered to be standing at the peak of martial arts." Lu Fengxian smiled. "I'm only at stage 1. Brother Chu, I've seen you fight so many elites, and you're not even at the peak. How can I be considered at the peak with my meager strength? But my biggest advantage in this life is that I'm lucky to have met you, Brother Chu. Otherwise, I might still be mingling with the lone cultivators." Just as Chu Xiu was about to say something to end this business exchange, a voice suddenly came from outside. "Where is Chu Xiu? Come out and greet me." Chapter 1400. Supreme Heavenly Demon's figure floated in mid-air, and his voice resounded throughout the entire Eastern Qi imperial city. However, everyone who heard Supreme Heavenly Demon's voice was dumbfounded. In this era, there was still someone who dared to speak to Chu Xiu in such a manner? It was no longer a secret that Chu Xiu controlled the forces. In the lower realm, he unified the Devil Dao, and the Daoist controlled the eastern region. At the same time, he was on good terms with the old barbarian king, an expert comparable to the ninth heaven. In addition, he had an unknown trump card in his hand. Even the dean of the Star River Martial Academy, Meng Xinghe, and the Brahmin sect leader hated him to the core, but they could not do anything to him. It could be said that with Chu Xiu's current strength and the forces he controlled, even if the 3 Pristine Palaces Dao Lords came, they would not be qualified for Chu Xiu to greet them. Had this person lost his mind? In the secret land of the Dragon Vein, Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu looked at each other, and they were also dumbfounded. It was normal for someone to come and find trouble with him, but for someone to use such a tone to find trouble with him, could it be that this person was a fool? Chu Xiu followed Lu Fengxian out of the Dragon Vein and saw the scene of the boundless black fog shrouding the entire Eastern Qi imperial city. The Devil Qi covered the sky and even condensed into a black dragon throne, which floated in mid-air, and Supreme Heavenly Demon sat cross-legged on it. Chu Xiu frowned and asked, "Who are you?" Supreme Heavenly Demon waved his hand and said, "Even if I say my name, I guess a junior like you would not have heard of it. You only need to remember that I am the #1 person in the Devil Dao since ancient times, and that is enough." Chu Xiu looked at the arrogant Supreme Heavenly Demon and did not know where he got his confidence from. #1 person in the Devil Dao since ancient times? Did he ask Dugu Weiwei? At this time, Supreme Heavenly Demon looked at Chu Xiu and nodded his head in satisfaction. His body is young and powerful, and his vitality is abundant. He is qualified to be my body. Junior, if you take the initiative to offer your body, I can promise you that after I research the secret method of immortality, I will reconstruct your body and make you the second immortal in this world. Chu Xiu looked at the unparalleled heavenly demon as though he was looking at an idiot. Where did this lunatic come from? For his opponent to be able to unleash the might of a martial immortal with only his primordial spirit, he was most definitely no fool. But if he wasn't a fool, why would he say something so ridiculous? He was either a fool or a madman. Immortality? Immortality? Longevity? This was simply like playing house. Peak existences like Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had been searching for such a long time but still couldn't find it. Dao Master and other supreme experts of the 9 heavens were still searching for it. How could you say that you could figure it out? This was simply a joke. Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He said coldly, "What are you? If you don't want to talk, I will capture you and slowly study you." Supreme Heavenly Demon's face darkened immediately. "You dare to call me a thing?" There was something wrong with his words. Lu Fengxian, who was watching the battle from below, almost laughed out loud. He wasn't worried about Chu Xiu at all. If he couldn't even deal with such a strange thing like Chu Xiu, then he wouldn't be Chu Xiu. After being trapped for tens of thousands of years, Supreme Heavenly Demon's consciousness was actually a little chaotic. However, he had a crazy and paranoid personality. In other words, he was really a lunatic. A lunatic who had great power in the past and was not weak now. But a lunatic wasn't a fool. He could still hear the sarcasm in Chu Xiu's words. Countless demonic qi surged around them. Soundless Heavenly Demon shouted, "How dare you!" Before he could finish his words, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to listen to him anymore. He directly attacked. He formed hand seals and formed a cross-shaped lotus seal. Boundless Buddhist light blossomed with dazzling radiance. As the cross-shaped lotus blossomed, it smashed into the boundless demonic fog. Immediately, the demonic fog dispersed and light was revealed. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. So it's actually a spearhead that looks like wax. Supreme Heavenly Demon roared crazily. Boundless demonic energy condensed into 9 demonic dragons. They formed a formation and charged towards Chu Xiu. At his peak, he was also a peak expert of the 9th heaven. Merely, he no longer had a physical body. Furthermore, he had been trapped for over 10,000 years. Even his primordial spirit was extremely weak. His overall strength was only equivalent to that of a first heaven martial immortal. That said, it remained that he was a peak existence of the 9th heaven. Even though he only had a weak primordial spirit, the power of laws and the various changes in the path of martial cultivation that he could control still far surpassed that of cultivators of the same cultivation. He was able to unleash power comparable to a 5th or 6th heaven martial immortal. Unfortunately for him, he had encountered Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu, who possessed astonishing power, was completely capable of shattering all of his flashy things with brute force. He unsheathed the breaking formation and slashed out with a heaven-devouring slash. Boundless saber intent condensed into a black hole. Everywhere it passed, it devoured and destroyed everything. The 9 demonic dragons were instantly shattered. Before the Supreme Heavenly Demon could react, Chu Xiu had already slashed his saber at him. Supreme Heavenly Demon roared and charged at Chu Xiu. He used the power of his primordial spirit to take on the heaven-devouring slash. Although the 7 limits were not saber techniques that targeted one's primordial spirit, the pure power of the saber intent was sufficient to tear apart the body of a primordial spirit. However, the Supreme Heavenly Demon had truly refined his primordial spirit to an extremely bizarre state. In Chu Xiu's perception, the other party's primordial spirit had already fused with the power of the rules between heaven and earth. This method was actually a deviant path to becoming a demon. In the past, Yi Weikong had tried it before. In the end, although it allowed him to advance from the 7th level of heaven to the 8th level of heaven and earth when he aged, it was actually suicide. He used great power in exchange for the extinction of his real spirit. No matter how strong a warrior's primordial spirit consciousness was, it could not be stronger than the ruthless rules of heaven and earth. However, the supreme heavenly demon was different. He was the exact opposite. Instead of fusing with the rules, he allowed the rules to fuse with him. He used a very strange method to separate a portion of the power of the rules and fuse it with his primordial spirit. In this way, even if his primordial spirit was damaged, as long as the rules that he fused with were not destroyed, he could immediately recover. This was also considered a different kind of indestructibility. As long as the rules were not completely destroyed and still existed in this world, he was an indestructible existence. Die! The supreme heavenly demon roared furiously. The power of his primordial spirit affected the rules, causing the surrounding demonic flames to burn violently and surge toward Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and cast the law embodiment of heaven and earth. He extinguished all the demonic flames with a punch and blasted the supreme heavenly demon into the ground at the same time. The other party was a primordial spirit. Even if it was torn apart by the powerful rules of the law embodiment of heaven and earth, it could still repair itself in a very short time. However, before the other party could do anything, Chu Xiu blasted out another punch and tore it apart again. He did not believe that there was true indestructibility in this world at all. That was a realm that Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had yet to pursue. How could a madman obtain it? Besides, Chu Xiu also discovered that every time the other party's primordial spirit was torn apart, the source of the primordial spirit would weaken a little. When the other party was extremely weak, he could even seal it at will and throw it into his ring or bracelet. He could completely pretend to be an old grandpa. Junior. You're courting death. When this lord regains his strength, I will refine your primordial spirit into a demonic puppet so that you can never be reincarnated. The supreme heavenly demon cursed furiously, but Chu Xiu despised the fact that the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth consumed too much energy. He immediately unleashed the 6 samsara wheels, trapping the supreme heavenly demon within and killing him. The supreme heavenly demon couldn't even condense his body anymore. At this moment, Yuan Kongsheng hurriedly landed from midair and shouted, "Cult Master Chu! Have mercy!" Chu Xiu looked up at Yuan Kongsheng, but the 6 paths wheel was still spinning violently. This thing belongs to your heavenly demon palace? Yuan Kongsheng smiled bitterly and said, "Cult Master Chu, please forgive me, this is actually an accident. This is the strongest demonic cultivator in the pugilistic world before the great ancient calamity, Supreme Heavenly Demon. He was sealed by all the experts in the pugilistic world at that time. We, the Heavenly Demon Palace, have some history with him, so we tried so hard to dig him out. There must be some misunderstanding in the Supreme Heavenly Demon attacking you. We, the Heavenly Demon Palace, have absolutely no intention of making an enemy out of you, official Chu." At this moment, the Supreme Heavenly Demon was still clamoring in the 6 paths wheel, that junior from the Heavenly Demon Palace. "What are you waiting for if you don't act now?" Yuan Kongsheng was actually a very cautious person, especially since he was actually very familiar with Chu Xiu. Ever since Chu Xiu became a martial immortal, he had already cooperated with Chu Xiu. He had personally witnessed Chu Xiu's rise from the Daoist. It could be said that he would kill anyone who stood in his way, and if Buddha stood in his way, he would kill Buddha. Even if this person before him was the legendary Supreme Heavenly Demon, an existence of the 9 heavens in the past, he would not dare to make an enemy out of Chu Xiu. Moreover, looking at the situation now, he knew that this person was being beaten up by Chu Xiu, and had no way of fighting back. It was uncertain how much strength he would have after he recovered to his peak, so how would Yuan Kongsheng dare to challenge Chu Xiu for him? "Senior, can you let me finish?" Cult Master Chu is an ally of the Heavenly Demon Palace. He is not to be provoked. Even if you want to possess someone else, can't you change it to someone else? The Supreme Heavenly Demon scolded, useless. With such a little bit of courage, you are far inferior to the ancestors of the Heavenly Demon Palace. As soon as Supreme Sky Demon's voice fell, he took the initiative to detonate half of his primordial spirit. The power that erupted in that instant allowed him to break through the shackles of the 6 Saha Samsara wheels and escape towards the west. Junior. Keep your body for now. I will first get the body of the second strongest demonic cultivator, and then I will settle the score with you. Seeing that the Supreme Heavenly Demon had escaped, Yuan Kongsheng heaved a sigh of relief and quickly apologized to Chu Xiu, hoping that he would forgive him. Cult Master Chu, don't worry, the Supreme Heavenly Demon has just been released from the seal, so he is still a little confused. I will stop him, and definitely won't cause trouble for you, Cult Master Chu. Chu Xiu's expression was a little strange as he said, you and I have been friends for so many years, Palace Master Yuan, you don't have to worry about it. But if I'm not wrong, you might have other troubles. That thing, that Supreme Heavenly Demon might have gone to West Chu to find Yi Shaonan of the moon-worshipping cult. Is Yi Shaonan difficult to deal with? Yuan Kongsheng knew that Yi Shaonan was a demonic cultivator in the lower realm second only to Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu's halo was too dazzling, and Yi Shaonan, the second strongest cultivator, was not noticed by the Daoist cultivators. Chu Xiu shook his head, not difficult, but very scary. Chapter 1401. Previously, Tianhun had told Chu Xiu that when the major sects descended to the lower realm, they would definitely dig out some of the things they had left behind in the lower realm. But Chu Xiu had never thought that Skyfiend Palace would be so strange, and actually dug out a madman. This so-called number 1 demonic cultivator in an era before the great calamity of antiquity times, Chu Xiu actually did not pay much attention to him. He was just a madman who stood in that era and studied longevity, but ended up going mad. In every era, there were experts who stood at the pinnacle. It wasn't easy to stand at the pinnacle of the 9 heavens. However, unless they were like Dugu Weiwa, who could influence the future generations for hundreds of years, who wouldn't die. Let Skyfiend Palace deal with the weirdo of Skyfiend Palace themselves. Yuan Kongsheng had not yet realized the seriousness of the problem. Although Yi Shaonan was a martial artist from the lower realm, he was not like Chu Xiu, who cheated to go to the Daoist to raise his level. But it was precisely because of this that he was able to reach this step, which was even more terrifying. At this time, in Miaojiang's moon-worshipping cult, Yi Shaonan was sitting cross-legged in the main hall. The 7-colored mist around him floated and condensed in front of him, finally turning into an identical Yi Shaonan. Yi Shaonan gently stretched out his hand, and the 2 Yi Shaonans merged into one. In an instant, Yi Shaonan's strength directly soared to the 5th heaven, and even the vitality of the entire moon-worshipping cult was completely devoured. At this time, Donghuang Tai, the high priest, and Long Ling, were all present. Seeing this scene, they immediately congratulated him in unison, "Congratulations, leader, for successfully refining the supreme twin life Gu." Yi Shaonan let out a long breath and waved his hand. The 7-colored mist floated away again, forming Yi Shaonan's appearance, but his strength did not change at all. The Yi Shaonan formed by the 7-colored mist had a somewhat dull look in his eyes. Although he looked exactly the same, he did not look like a normal person. This time, it was all thanks to Venerable Gu Yu's twin moon switching secret technique that the saintess brought that I was able to successfully refine the supreme twin life Gu. Thank your master for me. Long Ling smiled, "Leader, you don't have to be so polite. My master is also very interested in moon-worshipping cults' Gu techniques. The Guyu lineage has so many secret techniques, and even he has not cultivated some. He feels that he has made a profit by exchanging moon-worshipping cults' Gu techniques." Yi Shaonan nodded and suddenly said, "I will seal the supreme twin life Gu's refinement method and make it a taboo. No one is allowed to cultivate it. Xiaonan Tai and the other two revealed puzzled looks. They did not know why Xiaonan did they? Yi Xiaonan had never been a stingy person. He was only obsessed with the martial Dao. He had never been afraid that his own disciples would catch up to him and surpass him. Therefore, the first thing Yi Xiaonan did after successfully studying the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra was to place it in the scripture pavilion for people to read. Yi Xiaonan said solemnly, "The Supreme Twin Life Gu uses the seven-colored mind-bewitching worm as the foundation and gathers together to completely simulate another self." Yi Xiaonan said solemnly, "The Supreme Twin Life Gu uses the seven-colored mind-bewitching worm as the foundation. It gathers together to completely simulate another self and dual cultivates. It seems to have obtained a clone, and the clone can even share cultivation when fusing. But when I fused just now, I discovered that the scattered seven-colored mind-bewitching worms actually faintly fused together and gave birth to a vague and weak primordial spirit. It is simulating me, not only my body, but also my primordial spirit. If you fuse too many times, the seven-colored mind-bewitching worm will definitely counterattack. In the end, it is unknown whether you fuse with the goo worm or the goo worm fuses with you. This kind of goo worm can be used for battle, but for cultivation, the number of times you fuse with the goo worm must be strictly controlled. I have confidence, but others don't." Hearing Yi Xiaonan's words, they understood what was going on. Although moon-worshipping cult's Gu technique was mystical, it was also very evil. Every Gu technique actually had a great weakness and flaw. For example, the longevity Gu that Long Ling had fused with had very few harmless Gu worms. At this moment, the sound of an array being attacked came from outside moon-worshipping cult. Dong Wang Tai and the others were bewildered. The sects of the lower realm would not dare to attack moon-worshipping cult. Could it be that the Daoist sects had come to attack them? Everyone hurriedly walked out of the seclusion hall and saw Supreme Heavenly Demon sitting on the demonic dragon throne with demonic qi covering the void. However, because he had been beaten up by Chu Xiu, his aura was somewhat weak and not as strong as before. "Who is Yi Xiaonan? Offer your body to me, and I will guarantee you eternal life and look down on the pugilistic world in the future." Yi Xiaonan looked at Supreme Heavenly Demon silently without any change in his expression. Supreme Heavenly Demon frowned. Although the second strongest demonic cultivator in the lower realm in his memory seemed to have decent talent and body, he seemed to be a bit slow-witted and slow to react. But that didn't matter. He only wanted his body, nothing else. Just as Supreme Heavenly Demon was about to urge him, Yi Xiaonan suddenly pointed with his finger. Heaven and earth, yin and yang were separated, and the rules were destroyed and reconstructed. Heaven-mending finger. Yi Xiaonan was a man of few words. Most of the time, he liked to use actions to represent his words, just like what he was doing now. He believed that the peak of martial cultivation was eternal life. However, he only believed in the eternal life he cultivated, and not the eternal life given to him by others. Therefore, it was no longer important whether this fellow who had suddenly appeared was from the lower realm or the Daoist celestial, and whether what he said was true or false. If he didn't want to hand over his body, then he could only fight. Under the heaven-mending finger, the demonic qi and black fog were all torn apart. The rules were destroyed, and the attack was directed at Supreme Heavenly Demon. Although Yi Xiaonan had just reached the 5th layer of martial immortal, and his power was inferior to Chu Xiu's, it was enough for him to beat up Supreme Heavenly Demon. Supreme Heavenly Demon was caught off guard by Yi Xiaonan's sudden attack. His body was pressed into the ground by the heaven-mending finger. After his primordial spirit was reconstructed, Supreme Heavenly Demon's expression became completely malevolent. It was one thing for him to be sealed by the entire pugilistic world over 10,000 years ago. After all, the ones who did it were all peak experts of the pugilistic world. But now? 2 juniors were able to humiliate him like this. It was simply a humiliation. "All of you, die." Supreme Heavenly Demon roared furiously. Boundless demonic chi was pulled, turning into a myriad of demonic shadows that charged at Yi Xiaonan with terrifying might. However, Yi Xiaonan calmly formed hand seals again. In an instant, the world turned upside down, and the rules were completely distorted. Heaven-mending seal. Countless demonic shadows were annihilated by the powerful might of the heaven-mending seal. Immediately, Supreme Heavenly Demon was suppressed again. Half of Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit began to burn, while the other half used the power to break free from the heaven-mending seal. Like an arrow, it shot towards Yi Xiaonan, wanting to attack his primordial spirit. However, Yi Xiaonan stood there without moving, allowing the primordial spirit arrow to pierce through him. After all, Supreme Heavenly Demon was once an existence of the 9th heavenly layer. Although he was a bit crazy, he still had combat experience. He instantly sensed that something was amiss. Yi Xiaonan's body shattered into 7-colored mist, and another Yi Xiaonan suddenly appeared behind him. Yi Xiaonan unleashed the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra to its limits, forbidding all power of rules, and once again pressed him into the ground. At the same time, the 7-colored mist condensed into another Yi Xiaonan. The 2 Yi Xiaonans pressed down on Supreme Heavenly Demon and started beating him up. When Yuan Kongqing arrived at the moon-worshipping church, that was what he saw. Now, Yuan Kongqing was starting to doubt himself. Did he dig up the wrong person? The ancient experts that were dug up were all supreme beings with boundless magic power. They set off waves in the Jianghu. Even if they attracted a group of experts to seal them, they would only be a legend in the Jianghu, wouldn't they? But what about this one? As soon as he came out, he nervously tried to find someone to possess. In the end, he was beaten up twice, and his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Now, Yuan Kongqing felt that he could hang him up and beat him up. Imperceptibly, Yuan Kongqing's image of Supreme Heavenly Demon had almost fallen to the bottom of the valley. However, it didn't matter. Anyway, Yuan Kongqing didn't want the other party's strength. He just wanted the other party to help Sui Qiuyang out of his current predicament. Therefore, Yuan Kongqing wasn't too anxious. He even waited for a while before standing up and shouting, "Sect leader Yi, please wait a moment. This is a misunderstanding." Seeing Yuan Kongqing coming, Yi Xiaonan's main body stopped, but his clone was still beating up Supreme Heavenly Demon. Yuan Kongqing could more directly feel the misery of Supreme Heavenly Demon and the power that Yi Xiaonan displayed now. He hurriedly said, "This is a senior of my Sky Demon Palace who was sealed 10,000 years ago. He has just been released from the seal, so he has some mental problems. I hope sect leader Yi can forgive him. So, he's not an enemy of my moon-worshipping cult?" Yuan Kongqing hurriedly shook his head and said, "No, of course not." Yuan Kongqing also felt a little afraid of moon-worshipping cult. No wonder Chu Xiu valued it so much. It was a miracle that a sect from the lower realm could grow an expert of Yi Xiaonan's level, but it was also a very scary thing. Yi Xiaonan stared at Yuan Kongqing for a long time. Finally, with a wave of his hand, the clone also turned into a 7-colored cloud and returned to his body. This time, Supreme Heavenly Demon finally didn't continue to clamor about possessing someone. The power that he had absorbed from the Sky Demon Palace Array Masters had been completely exhausted after being beaten up twice. He didn't want to return to the state of being sealed again, so he could only leave with Yuan Kongqing dejectedly. On the way, Supreme Heavenly Demon was still complaining, "Your Sky Demon Palace is really getting worse with each generation. And the Demon Path martial artists in the lower realm, have they really not heard of this lord's name?" Yuan Kongqing had no choice but to say perfunctorily, "Lord Heavenly Demon, it's been 10,000 years. It's normal for people in the pugilistic world not to remember your name. But don't worry, as long as you can help my Sky Demon Palace solve the current problem, I will definitely help you find a suitable body to possess, so that you can return to your peak as soon as possible." Just as Yuan Kongqing was perfunctorily answering Supreme Heavenly Demon, he didn't expect that because he had dug out Supreme Heavenly Demon, he had also dug out a lot of things from Eastern Qi, including the original Divine Palace that Chu Xiu had been looking for. Chapter 1402. Although the upper mortal world and the lower mortal world overlapped, there were some deviations in some locations. For example, Tianhun had told Chu Xiu that the location of the original Divine Palace should be in the Central Plains, but it turned out to be in the East Sea County, which was similar to the location where the Supreme Heavenly Demon was dug out by the Heavenly Devil Palace. Moreover, it was not discovered by the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, but by Pak Donglai of the East Sea Alliance and Hua Yingqi of the Hua family. Chu Xiu not only told the Eastern Qi Imperial Court about the search for the original Divine Palace, but also asked the other forces under his command to participate in the search. After all, one more person meant one more chance. Pak Donglai and Hua Yingqi listened to Chu Xiu and wanted to participate in the fight for the power of the Central Plains warriors, so they invaded the East Sea County with their people. They heard that the Heavenly Devil Palace seemed to have dug up something amazing here, so they thought they were smart enough to dig up something here. As a result, they were really lucky and dug up something. After receiving the news, Chu Xiu did not rush over. Instead, he went to the northern Yan and West Chu to bring Shang Tianliang and Lu Jianghe, who had already broken through in seclusion. Then, he went to the southern Man branch of the Kunlun Devil cult to bring a group of people. Only then did he prepare to set out. According to Tianhun, the original Divine Palace was a group of lunatics. The things they left behind were very powerful and useful to him, but it also represented a certain degree of danger. Therefore, it was better to bring a group of people to be safe. Chu Xiu also realized that before the great ancient calamity, this group of cultivators had been rather restless. Perhaps they had been living too comfortably. After they stood at the peak, they always wanted to mess around with some strange things. For example, the ancestors of the blissful Devil Palace had wanted to restore the ancient demon god, but they had completely strayed from the path of creation. There was also the Supreme Heavenly Demon that was dug out by the Heavenly Demon Palace. It seemed like he had studied the secret art of longevity to the point that he had developed a problem with his spirit. No one knew which faction Chu Xiu belonged to in the original God Palace. However, he was even more ambitious. He wanted to create a god with the power of a human. He was simply a bunch of lunatics. Before the great ancient calamity, it was also a flourishing age of martial arts. It was a flourishing age of geniuses and madmen. After everyone gathered, Chu Xiu told them about the situation and took them to Donghai County. At the same time, Chu Xiu tossed a book to Shang Tianliang and Lu Jianghe, and said, "Old Lu, City Master Shang, these are some experiences for martial immortals to adapt to the power of regulations from the first to the third heavenly layer. It will allow you to cross the first 3 heavenly layers with the fastest speed possible." Of course, this thing was not written by Chu Xiu. He broke through the first 3 stages by cheating, and that kind of experience was not suitable for others. It was taken from the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Only these 2 sects would produce martial immortals every generation, so they could summarize such detailed experiences that were suitable for every martial immortal. Shang Tianliang took it and sighed, "I can't thank you enough for your kindness. This old man will definitely work for Cult Master Chu for the rest of his life. However, I didn't expect that this old man would be able to step into this legendary realm one day." Of course, Lu Jianghe would not be as sentimental as Shang Tianliang. Instead, he leaned over and asked, "Cult Master Chu, I have reached the martial immortal realm. Have you thought about when you should confer titles to the 4 great demon venerables?" Chu Xiu was a little surprised and said, "Your current strength is even stronger than the 4 great demon venerables in the past. Why do you still care about a reputation?" Lu Jianghe shook his head and said in a deep tone, "This is obsession, you don't understand. It's been 500 years, and things have remained the same, but people have changed. I didn't cultivate hard to prove anything. I just want to take back the position of demon venerables that I once lost. Then take your time to be obsessed with it. After saying that, Chu Xiu ignored the sentimental Lu Jianghe and directly ordered his people to go to East Sea Prefecture. At this time, on the coast of East Sea Prefecture, waves were beating against the shore, and dark clouds were roaring as if a storm was passing through. But in fact, the East Sea Prefecture was calm at this time of the year. The reason for this was the confrontation between two groups of people. The powerful momentum affected the power of heaven and earth, creating such a scene. On one side of the confrontation were the East Sea warriors represented by Pak Donglai and Huangqi. They had been hostile before, but now that they were preparing to enter the Central Plains warriors to develop, they united as if they were not the ones who had been vile before. Standing in front of Pak Donglai and Huangqi were the warriors of the Great Light Temple led by Su Yun and some of the warriors of the Heavenly Luo Temple. It was simple. After Pak Donglai and Huangqi found the clues about the original God Palace, they sent a message to Chu Xiu. They were quite honest. When they heard Chu Xiu say that they were not allowed to enter, they kept guarding outside. But at this time, Su Yun suddenly led a group of monks here, also eyeing the place where they had found the clues about the original God Palace. But they were not here for the original God Palace, and the East Sea warriors would never leak the secret. Su Yun kept saying that there were relics of the Buddhist sect here and wanted them to give way. Naturally, the East Sea warriors would not give way, so the two sides were in a stalemate. Su Yun looked at Bai Donglai and Huangqi before him and said in a deep voice, "The two of you, this poor monk is not deliberately making things difficult for the two of you. However, there really are remnants of my Buddhist sect here. As far as I know, none of you in the East Sea cultivates Buddhist sect techniques. In that case, why don't you give up this place? Give it to the Buddhist sect. The Great Light Temple, the Heavenly Luo Temple will owe you a favor." At that moment, Rama was still in seclusion in the Heavenly Luo Temple. In Su Yun's current state, he needed an opportunity to become a martial immortal, not to cultivate hard. Hence, he had brought people to search for the relics of the Buddhist sect. Moreover, the Heavenly Luo Temple wanted to familiarize itself with the warriors who had joined later. Hence, it had specially placed a portion of the Heavenly Luo Temple's warriors under Su Yun. Pak Donglai said coldly, "Master Su Yun, you have to be reasonable. We found this place first. Regardless of whether there are Buddhist sect relics here, if we don't want to give it up, do you still want to snatch it? Is this how the Heavenly Luo Temple, the #1 Buddhist sect holy land, acts?" In fact, the warriors of Donghai did not know much about the martial arts world of the Central Plains. It was Chu Xiu who had given them detailed information. However, they still had a way to deal with the Buddhist sect warriors. The simplest way was to use reason and righteousness to suppress them. Didn't the Buddhist sect boast about being open and aboveboard? In that case, they shouldn't be able to take things by force, right? Su Yun suddenly chuckled, but his voice immediately turned cold. "Of course, the Heavenly Luo Temple won't snatch it, but I will. If you stop the Buddhist sect from taking back what belongs to you, you will be making an enemy of the Buddhist sect. You must know that even the Buddhist sect has the wrath of a guardian deity. Today, even if the entire Jianghu says that the Buddhist sect is taking things by force, I will bear this crime myself. I will not implicate the Heavenly Luo Temple." Ever since the Great Light Temple had been destroyed by Chu Xiu, Su Yun's personality seemed to have changed into a different person. If it were before, Su Yun would have used gentler methods to solve the problem. However, Su Yun could not be bothered to think so much. What reputation did a person whose sect had been destroyed need? He, Su Yun, no longer had a reputation. So, he would simply and crudely snatch it. This was the first time he had done something for the Heavenly Luo Temple. He would rather bear the reputation of being overbearing and unreasonable than bear the reputation of being incompetent. Pak Donglai and Huangqi looked at each other. Their eyes revealed the same thought. They could not defeat him. Although they did not recognize Su Yun before, based on the cultivation that Su Yun displayed, which was infinitely close to the half-step martial immortal realm, they knew that they could not defeat him by force. Huangqi said in a deep voice, Master Su Yun, even if the heavenly Luo temple does not care about its reputation, is it not afraid of strong enemies? Do you know who we are working for now? We are working for the Kunlun devil cult's official Chu Xiu. The overseas Jianghu's existence in the lower realm had always been extremely low. Over the years, they had always been in a small circle and played with each other. So, apart from themselves, no one else in the Central Plains warriors knew that they were relying on Chu Xiu. Huangqi thought that by revealing Chu Xiu's name, he would make Su Yun retreat. However, he did not expect Su Yun's domineering expression to turn into murderous intent. It was an extremely dense murderous intent. 9-layered domains unfolded and boundless Buddhist light bloomed. Without saying anything, Su Yun attacked Huangqi, Pak Donglai, and the other overseas Jianghu warriors. Kill! At the same time, Su Yun also shouted. The Buddhist disciples under him also attacked the overseas Jianghu warriors. Huangqi and Pak Donglai did not expect that the other side would directly attack Chu Xiu when Chu Xiu was mentioned. In terms of strength, this group of overseas Jianghu warriors was naturally no match for the elites of the Great Light Temple and the Heavenly Luo Temple. They were almost forced to retreat step by step, which was extremely miserable. Su Yun's face was full of murderous intent. For him now, Chu Xiu had become his obsession. Anyone and anything related to Chu Xiu could arouse his murderous intent. This group of guys dared to rely on Chu Xiu, so they deserved to be killed. When Chu Xiu came to the edge of Donghai County with his people, he saw this scene. Sensing Chu Xiu's arrival, Su Yun immediately retreated with his people. He looked at Chu Xiu with vigilance, and at the same time, he activated the array disc in his arms. When Huangqi saw Chu Xiu coming, he immediately rushed over and began to loudly cry for help. Sect Master! This group of bald donkeys wants to drive us out. We discovered this place first, but this group of bald donkeys just robbed us. We brought up Cult Master Chu, but they didn't give us any face and killed even more fiercely. Chu Xiu waved his hand and interrupted Huangqi's cry of innocence. He looked at Su Yun with a faint smile and said lightly, Master Su Yun, since the Great Light Temple has joined the Heavenly Luo Temple and returned to the Buddhist ancestral land, you should have a brighter future. But now, why do you have to go against me? You're courting death. When he shouted the last word, the whole world seemed to stand still in an instant. The waves on the coast instantly exploded, as if the sea had been cut off, revealing a large area of land buried deep under the coast. This power was many times stronger than when the two groups of people fought. In an instant, everyone on both sides was shocked. Chapter 1403. The Great Light Temple, or rather, the people from the Heavenly Luo Temple, had actually appeared here. This surprised Chu Xiu. The original Divine Palace was not part of the three branches of Taoism, Buddhism, or Demon. To be more precise, it was closer to the Taoism and Demon paths. It had nothing to do with the Buddhist sect. What were they doing here? Su Yun said in a deep voice, Chu Xiu, the martial world is so big. It's not your place alone. Why can you come here and we can't? Chu Xiu shook his head lightly and said, Master Su Yun, you seem to have made a mistake. You are no longer the Great Light Temple's Wangnian Zen Hall's chief, and the Kunlun Devil cult is no longer the half-dead Kunlun Devil cult of the past. There is a huge difference between a martial immortal and a non-martial immortal. Do you think I still need to reason with you? Last time, the Heavenly Luo Temple's Zen Master Ji Kong came here and used Dugu Weiwei's blood essence to exchange for your two factions' residences. He also gave you a chance to live. Now, you insist on coming to me. Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? When he shouted the last word, the chilling murderous intent affected the rules of the entire world. It turned into a raging dragon and surged towards Su Yun. Previously, Chu Xiu had clearly become a martial immortal, but he did not kill the Great Light Temple. It was not because he was benevolent, nor was it because Chu Xiu was indecisive. It was because there was no need to. There were countless people in the world who hated him, and even more people who wanted to kill him. If he had to kill them one by one, wouldn't Chu Xiu die of exhaustion? The existences that could be taken seriously by the current Chu Xiu were the hierarch and temple master of the Sanskrit sect, the revered one of the heavenly Luo temple, and Zen master Ji Shan. Facing these people, Chu Xiu would use all his energy to deal with them. To put it bluntly, Su Yun and even the reborn Rama were no longer qualified to be his opponents. For such existences, Chu Xiu would not touch them before they provoked him. He was also too lazy to do so. However, if they really provoked him and blocked his path, Chu Xiu would definitely not tolerate it. Right at this moment, a Buddhist light suddenly descended and blocked Chu Xiu's imposing attack. The head of the Earth Treasury, Ji Kong, Fajing, and several martial immortals from the heavenly Luo temple descended together. Cult Master Chu is now the master of the eastern region, and he's a martial immortal at the fifth heaven. For him to attack a martial immortal who's not even a martial immortal, that's a bit unreasonable. Chu Xiu said indifferently, Venerable Su Yun was my senior in the past. In the martial Tao, those who have reached the pinnacle come first. The weak are not in the right. Master Jikong, what do you mean by this? No matter how much hatred I, Chu Xiu, attract, there's no need for me to be targeted by the heavenly Luo temple, right? I've just found a relic here, and you want to rob it? Could it be that the heavenly Luo temple is really prepared to fight to the death with the Kunlun devil cult? Jikong was taken aback. Rob your relic? This is clearly the 10,000 Buddha temple left behind by the ancestors of the Buddhist sect. Although Cult Master Chu is proficient in Buddhist sect techniques, you're not a member of the Buddhist sect. Strictly speaking, you're the one who robbed the heavenly Luo temple's relic. Chu Xiu looked at Pak Dong Lai and Hua Yingqi with a puzzled expression. If these two found the wrong place, it would be a joke. Although Chu Xiu didn't know what kind of place the 10,000 Buddha temple was, it definitely wouldn't be as helpful to him as the original God Palace. Otherwise, Tianhun wouldn't have asked him to dig up the original God Palace. Upon seeing this, Pak Donglai said hurriedly, Official Chu, we're definitely not mistaken. We dug up the stone tablet with the original God Palace's mark here. Zen Master Jikong frowned and said, the heavenly Luo temple's deduction can't be wrong. The 10,000 Buddha temple is here because the chief of the heavenly Luo temple's Tianmu pavilion used the relic of the 10,000 Buddha temple as a guide. He spent 10 years of his lifespan to deduce this. It can't be wrong. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll know once we dig it out. Chu Xiu used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. With a punch, an earth dragon flipped over and the entire coast was smashed by Chu Xiu. Endless waves flowed back into the sea, looking very mysterious. Zen Master Jikong frowned slightly when he saw Chu Xiu's simple and crude action. However, he didn't say anything. As Chu Xiu's punch landed, something really emerged from the coast that was originally covered by seawater. It was a huge ball of light. One side was pale green, while the other side was glowing with golden Buddha light. Through the ball of light, one could vaguely see various pavilions and terraces. It was obviously an independent space. At the sight of this, everyone present instantly understood what was going on. Pak Donglai and Hua Yingqi didn't find the wrong place. Similarly, the heavenly Luo temple's deduction wasn't wrong either. The original God Palace and the 10,000 Buddha temple were both here. However, when the upper mortal world and lower mortal world merged, some changes happened to them. The two independent spaces, which might have been closer to each other, actually shifted when they merged. They started to overlap and eventually, the two ruins merged together. This was interesting. The original God Palace and the 10,000 Buddha temple's secret realms merged together. Who knew what would happen to the things inside? If it had been the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Heavenly Luo Temple in the past, they might have teamed up to explore after discussing the conditions. However, it was obvious that it was impossible now. Therefore, at this moment, both sides were ready to fight and were ready to fight to decide the ownership of the secret realms. Zen Master Jikong said in a deep voice, "Cult Master Chu, are you really not going to give it to us? The 10,000 Buddha temple is very important to the Heavenly Luo Temple. If you give it to us, the Heavenly Luo Temple will definitely reward you generously." Chu Xiu said slowly, "I can give it to you, but the problem is, do you have what I want? Do you have another 100 or 80 drops of Dugu Weiwei's essence blood? Or the origin, can the Heavenly Luo Temple produce it?" Zen Master Jikong frowned and said, "Cult Master Chu, you are making things difficult for us. The Heavenly Luo Temple has already given away its essence blood. Moreover, the origin is an extremely precious existence. How can the Heavenly Luo Temple have it? On the contrary, if I'm not wrong, Cult Master Chu, you should have one origin. If one isn't enough, do you want a second one?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "No one will complain about having too many good things. Since the Heavenly Luo Temple can't give me what I want, and I don't want to give it to you, things are much simpler. Martial artists still have to rely on their strength to determine the winner. Let's just fight." As he said that, Chu Xiu's hand was already on the broken array formation at his waist. Zen Master Jikong frowned when he saw this. The Heavenly Luo Temple wasn't afraid of fighting, but it didn't want to engage in a meaningless battle. Chu Xiu's way of doing things was simple and crude, but he didn't want to fight here. Besides, he might not be able to win. He had witnessed Chu Xiu's strength in the gamble last time. Chu Xiu wasn't at a disadvantage when fighting against martial artists at the second or even the third heavenly layer. "Hold on." Chu Xiu looked at Zen Master Jikong and said, "Oh? Master Jikong, are you going to give it to me?" Zen Master Jikong shook his head and said, "Of course not. The Myriad Buddha Palace is very important to the Heavenly Luo Temple. We will definitely not give it to you. But at the same time, this remnant is also very important to Cult Master Chu. So, you won't give it to me. Since no one wants to give it to you, it wouldn't be worth it if we were to fight for real. Why don't we both make a bet? We'll send our disciples below the third heavenly layer of martial immortal, no more than 10 of them, to enter and fight for it. Victory or defeat doesn't depend on us, but on our disciples. If one side is in danger, you and I can also save them. However, the side that makes a move first will be considered to have lost and will have to retreat. What do you think, Cult Master Chu?" Chu Xiu had a faint smile on his face. "Master Jikong, as an eminent monk of the Buddhist sect, you like to gamble so much? You gambled last time and you're going to gamble this time?" Zen Master Jikong shook his head and said, "That's why I can't become a Buddha. A little gambling is fun. Gambling once in a while can avoid some losses. Isn't that good? Does Cult Master Chu dare to make this bet?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Why wouldn't I dare?" With a smile on his face, Zen Master Jikong immediately ordered several first and second heavenly layer of martial immortals from the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple, as well as several arcane understanding realm cultivators, including Su Yun, to step forward. Previously, when he fought against Chu Xiu, he wasn't able to defeat Chu Xiu. He admitted that Chu Xiu's battle prowess was indeed shocking. It was no wonder such a person could stir up a storm in the entire Daoist and lower realms. However, while he admitted that Chu Xiu was strong, he didn't believe that the Kunlun devil cult could be as strong as him. For a sect like the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple, its disciples were all nurtured generation after generation. Practically every generation had a few outstanding cultivators. It could be said that none of the cultivators from the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple were weak. All of their disciples were above the same level, let alone martial immortals. Therefore, Zen Master Jikong was very confident in this bet. Chu Xiu said to Shang Tianliang and Lu Fengxian, City Master Shang, Brother Lu, I'll leave it to you. Shang Tianliang and Lu Fengxian nodded calmly. Lu Jianghu, who had stepped into the martial immortal realm, couldn't help but ask, what about me? Chu Xiu glanced at him and said, don't embarrass yourself. Lu Jianghu's eyes widened. He felt that Chu Xiu was targeting him. Shang Tianliang and Lu Fengxian were left to them. Why must I embarrass myself? Before Lu Jianghu could refute, the people from the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple had already stepped forward. They also stepped forward and both sides entered the space. A white light flashed. When Lu Fengxian and the others stepped into the space, distorted palaces appeared in front of them. Some of them had even been completely torn apart and piled up together, becoming ruins. These palaces were obviously of two different styles. The 10,000 Buddha Temple and the Divine Origin Palace had completely overlapped. Lu Fengxian asked Shang Tianliang and Lu Jianghu, City Master Shang, Senior Lu, should we explore first or make a move first? Before Shang Tianliang could speak, Lu Jianghu stood up and sneered, explore? Explore my ass. Let's get rid of these bald donkeys first. After that, we can explore however we want. Chapter 1404. After stepping into the martial immortal realm, Lu Jianghu's arrogance skyrocketed. He had always treated the position of the four-demon exalted as an obsession. Of course, it was still an obsession now. However, after becoming a martial immortal, his strength even surpassed the four-demon exalted. At the same time, Lu Jianghu was bursting with confidence. Chu Xiu told him not to embarrass himself. Today, he, demon exalted Lu, would properly teach these bald donkeys a lesson. The Kunlun devil cult did not only have Chu Xiu as a powerful individual. He, Lu Jianghu, was not to be trifled with either. Before the Heavenly Treasure Temple could react, they saw Lu Jianghu rushing over. That stunned them. The Kunlun devil cult was actually so aggressive? Could he be the strongest expert under Chu Xiu? On the Heavenly Treasure Temple's side, a bare-chested, fierce-looking middle-aged monk asked Su Yun, who is he? Could he be a peak expert under Chu Xiu? He was the head of the Skanda Hall of the Heavenly Treasure Temple, Ji Sheng, a second-layer martial immortal. Although he was in the same generation as Zen Master Jishan and the others, he was one of the younger heads of the Heavenly Treasure Temple. Su Yun lightly snorted and said, what expert? This person was a hall master under Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago. Due to some reason, his primordial spirit was sealed. 500 years later, he was released and became a subordinate of Chu Xiu. 500 years ago, he wasn't even a demon exalted. 500 years later, he naturally isn't much of a character either. Be careful of Lu Fengxian. He is an elite of the Longhu list in the same generation as Chu Xiu. He once obtained the inheritance of the ancient demon god Lu Wenho. He possesses unparalleled strength and shocking talent. As for that Shang Tianliang, I wonder where Chu Xiu found him. Although he is old, his strength is shocking. He is very difficult to deal with. Su Yun's words were not spoken through voice transmission. Instead, he spoke them out loud. That immediately made Lu Jianghu furious. What did he mean by not being a demon lord was not a character? With his current strength, even if the Heartless Demon Venerable and the Battle Martial Demon Venerable from 500 years ago came together, he would still be able to beat them up. Of course, he couldn't beat the Red Lotus Demon Venerable, nor could he bear to. A boundless sea of blood surged behind Lu Jiang River, surging towards the warriors of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple. Ji Sheng shouted and stepped out. His hands formed a mudra, and in an instant, the Buddha's light shone brightly, and the image of an Empyrean god appeared behind him. Guardian Skanda descended to subdue demons. As that seal descended, the entire world seemed to tremble under this Buddhist seal. It was the pinnacle of power. The boundless sea of blood was suppressed by this Buddhist seal. In an instant, it was torn apart and turned into countless strands of blood dancing in the air. Ji Sheng nodded lightly. It seemed that Su Yun was right. This Lu Jiang, he really wasn't a powerful person. Although he was a martial immortal, his strength and foundation were too weak. He was unable to pose a threat to Chu Feng. Judging by his appearance, he had only just stepped into the martial immortal realm. He had yet to completely familiarize himself with his own power. However, in the next moment, the scattered strands of blood suddenly gathered around Ji Sheng's body. They suddenly turned into a huge cocoon of blood, wrapping him within. Lu Jiang, he formed a mudra with his hands and laughed coldly. Die, bald donkey. As he spoke, the cocoon of blood suddenly pulsed rhythmically, like a beating heart. Trapped within, Ji Sheng's entire body's qi and blood were connected to the cocoon of blood. As the cocoon pulsed rhythmically, it suddenly erupted. His heart felt like it was about to explode. The warriors of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple behind him felt that something was amiss. They quickly attacked together, wanting to destroy the cocoon of blood. However, in the instant that they attacked, the cocoon of blood exploded on its own, sending Ji Sheng flying. Blood splattered everywhere, and Ji Sheng's face became incomparably pale. So this is the guy you were talking about, a nobody? Ji Sheng glared furiously at Su Yun. If it wasn't for Zen Master Ji Shan's instructions to treat Su Yun and Rama, who had joined later, with a good attitude to win their hearts, Ji Sheng would have already started cursing them. Su Yun opened his mouth, but he was unable to say anything. That was because Lu Jiang, he was indeed not the most famous among the people under Chu Xiu. 500 years ago, everyone would remember Dugu Weiwei and the 4 great demon sovereigns. However, how many halls, vassals and demon envoys did the Kunlun devil cult have back then have? Even if there weren't 100, there were at least 99. Even if Lu Jiang, he was the strongest among them, it was difficult for his fame to be spread to the later generations. However, that did not mean that Lu Jiang, he was a mediocre person. 80% of his blood demon divine technique was self-created, and 20% came from Dugu Weiwei's guidance and improvement. It could be said that his martial path came from self-discovery. He walked an absolutely independent martial path, and he could establish his own sect no matter where he was. Although the Daoist martial path was prosperous, the majority of martial immortals still walked on the martial path of others. The sea of blood behind Lu Jiang, he surged. He pointed at Ji Sheng and the others and sneered, "Remember, I am Lu Jiang he, the Blood Sea Demon Sovereign. Otherwise, when your head is chopped off, you won't know who killed you." Lu Jiang he's words attracted too much hatred. The people of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple were instantly enraged. They had never seen such an arrogant person. With a gloomy expression, Ji Sheng waved his hand. All of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple's cultivators shone with Buddhist light and rushed out. Shang Tianliang shook his head helplessly. He was curious if Lu Jiang he had only been sleeping for the 500 years he was imprisoned. Why was he getting weaker and weaker? However, since Lu Jiang he had successfully attracted hatred, they had no choice but to rush forward. Although Shang Tianliang and the other two had just stepped into the martial immortal realm, they had deep foundations, so they did not notice any instability in their power. Lu Fengxian held the unparalleled halberd in his hand. The pitch-black demonic aura around his body condensed into a battle armor. He used the 9 heavens fiend golden body to the extreme. When the halberd smashed down, it involuntarily affected the rules of power. It was infinitely close to a divine ability. The person in front of him was also a martial immortal at the 2nd layer of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple. However, in terms of power, he was unable to fight back against Lu Fengxian. With a furious shout, golden Sanskrit appeared around the cultivator's body and enveloped him. It was the indestructible golden body. Although he had not cultivated it to great success, it was not weak. At this moment, all of Lu Fengxian's qi and blood condensed. His scorching qi and blood burned like raging flames. The power condensed in his arms, causing the pitch-black demonic aura of the nine heavens fiend golden body to be dyed red. In the next instant, the halberd smashed down. Suddenly, a violent roar came from the sky. The space was torn and trembled. The extreme power even shook the small space that contained the two remnants, causing the outside world to tremble. The complexion of the heavenly net treasure temple cultivator who unleashed the indestructible golden body changed. He formed a swastika with his hand and placed it before his body. However, in the next instant, before the extreme power, before the unparalleled halberd that was comparable to a divine ability, the swastika shattered. The indestructible golden body shattered as well. His entire body was sent flying by Lu Fengxian's halberd. That cultivator sprayed out blood along the way. Some traces of blood could also be seen on Lu Fengxian's arms. However, he scratched his head in a slightly embarrassed manner. This was the first time he had used the power of a martial immortal. He was unable to control it and was too ruthless. When Shang Tianliang saw that, he couldn't help shaking his head and said, "The younger generation will surpass us in time." In Shang Tianliang's opinion, Lu Fengxian's strength could already be considered to be at the peak of the younger generation. In fact, even he felt ashamed of himself. Of course, Shang Tianliang did not compare himself to Chu Xiu. In his eyes, a monster like Chu Xiu was no longer worth comparing himself to. Not wanting to be too inferior to a member of the younger generation, Shang Tianliang took a step forward. Then, a strange rhythm began to change around him. After his withering glory domain reached the martial immortal realm, it was able to affect time and space. When he shot out his fist, the martial immortal before him was shocked to discover that his power was dissipating non-stop. To be exact, it was not dissipating. Rather, the power around his body was dissipating at a rate 10 times, or even several tens of times faster than others. Right after he attacked, his power began to dissipate with the passage of time. In the end, his power became incomparably weak. It was so weak that it posed no threat at all. As for Shang Tianliang's fist, it twisted the space around him, causing the surrounding laws to distort. The martial immortal's body seemed to have been imprisoned, unable to break free. Shatter! The martial immortal from the Tianluo treasure temple shouted. Boundless qi and blood around him soared into the sky. The Buddha's Dharma image appeared behind him, but it was mixed with a trace of blood. Since the laws had already been distorted, he might as well not use them. He could use pure power to break free. Shang Tianliang shook his head and said, "Why are the martial immortals so hot-tempered now? They've only just arrived and they're already ready to fight with their lives on the line?" As Shang Tianliang's voice fell, he formed a hand seal and a strange power bloomed. Flowers wilted and flowers bloomed. The 4 seasons withered and flourished. Shang Tianliang had been growing vegetables ever since he came out of the oasis. This was not only a nostalgia or obsession for the environment of the oasis, but also the path of martial arts that he had persisted on. There were no soaring clouds, nor was there a majestic power strong enough to trigger the power of laws. It was as if the 4 seasons of the great Tao of heaven and earth had descended in front of the Tianluo treasure temple martial immortal. He could not break free, nor could he find a target to break free from. Under that power, the powerful Buddha's Dharma image that he had just condensed began to shatter and dissipate. In an instant, the martial immortal's eyes became extremely shocked. This power did not seem to belong to Shang Tianliang, but to the world. Human power could be resisted and reversed, but how could the power of heaven and earth be reversed? In just a few moves, Shang Tianliang and the other martial immortals under Chu Xiu had gained the upper hand. It could be said that they had completely suppressed the Tianluo treasure temple martial immortal. At that moment, in the outside world, Chu Xiu was calm and unruffled as he looked at Jikong, who had an ugly expression on his face. Chu Xiu said indifferently, Master Jikong, your gambling luck isn't that good. You've lost again. Chapter 1405. Ji Kong's luck in gambling was not good. Or rather, the timing he chose was not good. Had he not encountered Shang Tianliang and the others who had stepped into the martial immortal realm, Chu Xiu would have no choice but to fight. He would not have bet with him. However, after Shang Tianliang reached the martial immortal realm, Chu Xiu's subordinates, from the first heaven to the fifth heaven, could be said to be complete. There were martial immortals of all levels. In fact, it could even be said that they stood at the apex of cultivators of the same level. Of course, this did not mean that the martial immortals of the Sky Luo Temple were weak. It was just that Shang Tianliang and the others were too strong. Shang Tianliang, Lu Jianghu, and Lu Fengxian had all relied on themselves to walk their own path of martial cultivation. They had encountered opportunities and slaughtered their way to their current realm. As for the heads of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple and the other pavilions, even after reaching the martial immortal realm, they would still walk the path of the former. Very rarely would there be a generation of martial immortals who could walk their own path and establish their own pavilions. Although there were a few in the past 10,000 years, there were none in this generation. Chu Xiu looked at Zen Master Ji Kong and said indifferently, Zen Master Ji Kong, at this stage, are you still not prepared to admit defeat? If we get serious and get injured, don't blame the Kunlun devil cult for killing us. Zen Master Ji Kong let out a long breath, put his palms together, chanted a Buddhist name, and said in a deep voice, life and death are decreed by fate. At the martial immortal realm, no one would fear death even in a real fight to the death. This is only the beginning. It's not yet time to determine victory or defeat. They had only exchanged a few blows. Even though the Sky Luo Temple's side was at a complete disadvantage, they could not just surrender. Otherwise, where would the Sky Luo Temple put its face? As they fought, the remnants of the primordial God Palace and the 10,000 Buddha Palace began to collapse, revealing some of the things buried within. The 10,000 Buddha Palace was a remnant left behind thousands of years before the great calamity of the ancient era. It was the most prosperous period of Buddhism in the Western region. At that time, although there weren't as many as 10,000 Buddhist sects in the entire Western region, there were hundreds of Buddhist sects branches, so there were at least 8,000 of them. During that era, the Buddhist sect would have a gathering every 10 years, and the gathering place was the Wanfu Palace. However, there was an internal strife in the Buddhist sect, which led to the disappearance of 90% of the Buddhist sect's branches. This also led to the rise of the Heavenly Luo Temple and the decline of the myriad Buddha Palace. However, no matter how much this place had declined, it was still the sacred ground of the Buddhist sect in the past. It was said that when the Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple chose to leave the upper mortal heavens in search of a new lease of life in the Daoist continent, there were still some old monks of the 10,000 Buddha Palace who stayed behind. Buddha statues and Buddhist scriptures were revealed in the shattered palaces. Some of them were even damaged, which made Zen Master Jikong, who was watching the battle from the outside, frown slightly. As for the things that were enshrined in the main hall of the original God Palace, they were a little strange. They were all oddly shaped things. Some looked like ancient demonic gods, and some were magical objects that were pieced together. Some didn't even look like humans. Tian Hun's understanding of the original God Palace was also vague. He didn't know what was in the deepest part of the original God Palace. He only knew that the lunatics of the original God Palace must have researched something good. At the very least, it would be very useful to the current Chu Xiu. As the two groups fought, their figures involuntarily shifted towards the deepest part of the remnant. They didn't realize that a pair of eyes had already locked onto them. At that moment, in the deepest part of the remnant, two main halls were stacked together. On one side was the majestic Mahavira Hall, and on the other side was a strange palace with a circular top and a strange bottom. Halos flickered in the depths of the strange palace, and in the center of the halos floated an existence that didn't seem like a human. To be more precise, it was a strange living creature. It was 30 feet tall, like a small giant. Its body was like a human's, but it had a tail that was as long as an arm. Every bit of its skin and flesh shone with a golden light, as if it had been chiseled by a knife. It could be said to be perfect. It had 4 arms, and its face was shrouded in light, so it couldn't be seen clearly. One could only vaguely see 1 black and 1 white, and 2 eyes without pupils. At the same time, there were 2 curved half-moon horns on its head, 1 black and 1 white. However, at that moment, its 4 arms and legs were shackled by bronze chains. The chains were engraved with runes that suppressed its power. TSK, as expected of the perfect living creature created by the original God Palace in the past. Every bit of its existence was created according to the power of this world. If the original God Palace had truly created you, they might have really created a god. Standing in front of the strange living creature was a monk. He was a burly monk, but his face was pale and distorted. His broken body was pieced together by bone spurs, and his eyes were glowing red. His appearance was almost identical to the 3 existences from 500 years ago that Chu Xiu had seen in the dragon's vein in the past. However, compared to them, this monk seemed to have a great sense of autonomy. He could speak and communicate freely, unlike the other 3, who even had difficulty speaking. Perfect? The heavenly way is flawed, and it isn't a perfect existence. How can I be perfect? Moreover, the people of the original God Palace aren't gods themselves, so how can they create gods? They aren't gods, and they don't understand gods. Humans can't create existences that they don't understand. This is a paradox. The strange living creature's voice didn't sound like a man's or a woman's gender. The monk shook his head and said, "Humans can't create gods, but you can become a god yourself. In the past 10,000 years, you have read all the ancient books of the original God Palace. Don't you want to go out? A perfect living creature like you is unique in this world. Your cultivation speed is tremendous. As long as you are given a chance, you will mend yourself to the point of perfection and become a real god." The strange living creature gazed at the monk calmly with its black and white eyes. The ancient books of the original God Palace taught me many things. For example, if you want something, you must first give it. I want to go out, but I want to know the price you have to pay for letting me out. What you will get will definitely be more than what I got. The monk sighed and said, "You aren't a human. Why do you need to read the writings of so many people? The human heart is sinister. It will only make you filthy and further away from being a god. I feel that you are scolding me." The monk's slightly ferocious face stiffened. Then, he said in a deep voice, "Since you want to use the human way to talk, it's even simpler. I am here on behalf of my master. I can let you go. The price is 2 things. One is that when my master returns to this world, you have to stand on his side and clear the obstacles for him. The second thing is your 3rd eye." The glabella of the strange living creature flickered. A slit opened and a vertical eye peeked out. The vertical eye didn't have a pupil. Black and white intertwined like chaos. It was very strange. The strange living creature shook its head and said, "I can promise you the first thing, but not the second. One eye can look at the sky and the other eye can look into the netherworld. Only my 3rd eye is the eye that controls the balance of yin and yang. The 3rd eye is the most perfect state. You said that I can become a god. If I give you my 3rd eye, I will never be able to become a god." The monk shook his head and said, "Wrong, very wrong. If I'm not wrong, you still can't fuse with the 3rd eye. In the past, the original God Palace created this perfect 3rd eye and wanted to let you fuse with it. In the end, even after the original God Palace was destroyed, they didn't succeed. If you can fuse with the 3rd eye, why did you hide it for more than 10,000 years? The perfection created isn't true perfection. You need the third eye, but it isn't the third eye that the original God Palace gave you. It is the third eye that you comprehended from the source of yin and yang. Give it to me, and I will give you freedom. Serve my master, and when he returns, he will give you true perfection and help you become a god. The strange living creature was silent for a long time and said, "You said that humans can't create gods. But my master has already surpassed the human body and controls a world. Such an existence is already above gods and Buddhas." The monk's eyes were suffused with a blood-red glow. However, it wasn't murderous intent but fanatical reverence. At this time, the sounds of Shang Tianliang and the others fighting with the people of the heavenly Luo treasure temple came from outside. The monk frowned and urged, "Quick! There isn't enough time. You should know what your identity is. The original God Palace wants to make you a god, but outsiders see you as a monster. The timing isn't right. There are already people outside fighting their way in. If they see you, you will never have the chance to escape." The strange living creature was silent for a long time. Finally, it said, "Remove my seal first. Give me the third eye first." The strange living creature shook its head and said in an unhurried and emotionless tone, "Remove my seal first." The monk was helpless. It was really difficult to communicate with such an inhuman existence. He formed seals with both hands and Buddhist light burst out, quickly dissolving the sealing formation runes on the chains from the outside. When all the bronze chains were dissolved, the strange living creature's body emitted rays of light. Its aura continued to rise. Just by looking at its aura, it had the might of a sixth or seventh heaven's martial immortal. After removing the seal, it didn't go back on its words. It formed seals with both hands and the third eye on its forehead slowly stretched out. There were even traces of blood lines on it. The strange living creature stretched out its hand and severed the blood lines. Just as it was about to sever all the blood lines, the hall was smashed into pieces. Lu Jianghu, who originally had the upper hand, mocked Monk Ji Sheng and angered the other party. He burned his blood essence and attacked with all his might, sending Lu Jianghu into the deepest part of the hall. Lu Jianghu coughed and crawled up while cursing. He coincidentally saw the monk in front of him. He was stunned at first, then as if he had seen a ghost, he suddenly shouted, "Monk Long Tu! How could it be you? You were clearly stabbed by the heartless demon Venerable. How could you still be alive? Did you become a zombie?" Chapter 1406. Lu Jianghu's sudden appearance made the entire scene awkward. The monk named Longtu's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted at the strange creature, "There's no time. Give me the third eye." Chu Xiu had already discovered them when the strange creature had completely separated the third eye on its forehead. Chu Xiu had never expected that Dugu Weiwei's life spirit would be so deep in the netherworld heaven. Not only had he infiltrated the dragon vein of the three kingdoms, but he had also sent people to infiltrate this secret realm from 10,000 years ago. The moment the strange creature's third eye appeared, the yin and yang origin in Chu Xiu's body throbbed. Immediately, Chu Xiu knew that Tianhun wanted him to take the third eye. Although the strange creature itself was a precious treasure that had been meticulously carved, it was still a creature that had developed spiritual intelligence. Chu Xiu could not possibly stew it in a pot, could he? The third eye was the last link that the original divine palace had constructed to create a perfect creature. It was an extremely perfect existence. Monk Longtu's figure turned into a golden light and grabbed at the third eye. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu had already taken a step forward and appeared in that space in an instant. Zen Master Ji Kong, who was standing at the side, was stunned when he saw Chu Xiu enter so anxiously. He shouted behind Chu Xiu, "Cult Master Chu, what is going on here? Why did someone appear in that secret realm?" How could Chu Xiu be in the mood to reply to Zen Master Ji Kong? He had already slashed out with the breaking formation blade in his hand. The powerful blade light directly traversed the entire ruins, separating everything. At the same time, it completely separated the third eye from Monk Longtu. However, when Chu Xiu grabbed at the third eye, the two horns on the strange creature's head suddenly emitted a black and white light. Extreme yin and yang power surged toward Chu Xiu and completely enveloped Chu Xiu. It is not something that belongs to you. Chu Xiu said faintly, but it also doesn't belong to you. You are an existence created by the original divine palace. Do you really belong to you? Chu Xiu's words seemed to have provoked the strange god, causing him, who had always been calm, to suddenly become irritable and angry. Of course it belongs to me. The original god palace wants to create a god, and I am their perfect god. I am the original god. A god who stands above men. Monk Longtu hurriedly shouted, "That's right. You are the original god, the only true god in this world. Don't let him obtain the third eye. Snatch it away." Noisy. Chu Xiu snorted coldly and said to Lu Jianghe and the others, "Let's deal with them first." Although Lu Jianghe didn't know what was going on, he looked at Monk Longtu and laughed coldly. "Monk Longtu, I haven't seen you for 500 years. I haven't forgotten how you bullied me back then. Back when I was making a living on Lini River, you were the one who brought people to find trouble with me. Now, regardless of whether you have come back to life or not, I will kill you again." Monk Longtu looked at Lu Jianghe and was puzzled. He frowned and asked, "Who are you? You don't even remember who I am?" Lu Jianghe felt humiliated when he heard this. Back then, he didn't have a sense of existence, and no one remembered him. In a rage, Lu Jianghe turned into a sea of blood and charged at Monk Longtu. But in the next moment, Monk Longtu formed a Vajra seal and an incomparably vast Buddhist light smashed down. Lu Jianghe was blasted back by the Buddhist seal, and a lot of his qi and blood evaporated. The strength that Monk Longtu displayed was comparable to a fifth heaven martial immortal. Right now, Lu Jianghe and the others were indeed no match for him. "Attack together!" Lu Jianghe called out. Shang Tianliang, Lu Fengxian, and the others went up to attack Monk Longtu. The people of the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple were stunned and didn't know what to do. Originally, they were engaged in an intense battle with Chu Xiu's subordinates. However, as they were fighting, two more people appeared in the ruins. Or a man and a monster who called himself a god. Xuyun's expression suddenly changed and he said softly, "Ancestral Master." "How can it be Ancestral Master?" Zen Master Ji Kong frowned, "Who do you think that monk is? Your Ancestral Master?" Xuyun nodded with an ugly expression, "If I'm not mistaken, he's the abbot of the Great Light Temple from 500 years ago, the reincarnated Vajra, Venerable Longtu. He's the only person in the history of the Great Light Temple who joined the Great Light Temple halfway through and became the abbot in the end. But he should have died 500 years ago by the hands of the heartless demon Exalt, one of the 4 demon Exalts under the Kunlun devil cult. How is he still alive?" Xuyun felt that Monk Longtu looked familiar, but because Monk Longtu was a person from 500 years ago, and Xuyun didn't really care about the history of 500 years ago, he only saw Venerable Longtu's portrait and deeds in the scripture pavilion when he was young, so he didn't recognize him. But just now, when Monk Longtu used the Vajra seal to send Lu Jianghe flying, Xuyun was certain of his identity. In the entire history of the Great Light Temple, only Monk Longtu could evolve a basic martial technique like the Vajra seal to the acme of perfection. Ji Kong frowned and said, "How can someone who died 500 years ago be resurrected? Unless he didn't die 500 years ago, and his body, primordial spirit, and true spirit were preserved and sealed." Xuyun shook his head, "That's impossible. The Great Light Temple saw him being killed with our own eyes. His primordial spirit dissipated, and his body was cremated by the ancestors of the Great Light Temple. They even left behind a Sarira." Hearing Xuyun say this, Ji Kong hesitated. He didn't understand what was going on. At that moment, the primordial spirit obviously believed Monk Longtu's words. A crack appeared on its forehead, and countless bloodlines bloomed. It wanted to take back the third eye. However, this thing was the key to Chu Xiu's breakthrough. Even if it was a real god, Chu Xiu would still dare to take it by force, let alone a man-made fake god. The 6 Saha mystical wheels appeared and enveloped the primordial spirit and the third eye. The 6 forces attacked separately, trying to trap the primordial spirit and take the third eye. More than 10,000 years ago, the primordial spirit had been sealed when it was first created. The primordial god palace had also been destroyed because it had triggered some kind of taboo. Therefore, the primordial spirit had never experienced battle. However, it was a perfect creature created by gathering all the power of the primordial god palace. Its talent for battle had been imprinted in its bones. It didn't need cultivation techniques or weapons. Its body was the most powerful existence. The 2 horns on the primordial spirit's head had yin and yang qi twirling around its body. The primordial spirit's body suddenly shot toward Chu Xiu. Its speed was so fast that it broke the sound barrier in an instant. It also used its body's strength to break through the blockade of the 6 Saha mystical wheels. It decisively chose not to fight for the third eye. Instead, it wanted to kill Chu Xiu first. Then, it would naturally be able to get the third eye. This choice of battle talent was amazing. It was a choice made subconsciously. However, it was a pity that sometimes this choice was not the right one. Many people sometimes had the illusion that they could win. Although the primordial spirit was known as a perfect creature, it wasn't truly perfect. Choosing Chu Xiu as its target was its biggest mistake. Chu Xiu used the law phenomenon of heaven and earth. With the support of the undying holy demon body, his body looked more like a demon god than the primordial spirit. With a loud explosion, the primordial spirit was blasted away. However, its body was shockingly strong. Even after taking on the punch of the law phenomenon of heaven and earth, it wasn't injured. It shook its head and rushed forward again. At the same time, the 4 arms behind its back formed fist seals. The power of the 4 extremes was evolving in the sky and on the ground. The azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. The primordial spirit stood in the middle. With its strength alone, it formed a formation. Interesting. It seems that you have learned all the cultivation techniques of the primordial god palace. It's a pity that the greatest achievement of the primordial god palace isn't their cultivation techniques. It's you. Chu Xiu didn't want to waste time with the primordial spirit. The strength displayed by the primordial spirit was equivalent to that of a 5th or 6th heaven martial immortal. However, the primordial spirit's physical body was extremely shocking. As such, the threat level was comparable to that of a 7th heaven martial immortal. Chu Xiu had combined the law phenomenon of heaven and earth and the undying holy demon body. This was the pinnacle of strength. Even if a 7th heaven martial immortal like Ji Kong were here, he would have to use all his strength to take on the attack. In the end, the primordial spirit used only its physical body to take on Chu Xiu's law phenomenon of heaven and earth. It wasn't even injured. It was only sent flying. Only God knew what method the primordial god palace had used to create such a physical body that was comparable to that of an ancient demon god. However, Chu Xiu still believed that nothing in this world was truly perfect. Even if an ancient demon god was resurrected, it would still be the same. No matter how strong the physical body was, there would always be a sharp blade that could tear it apart. Under the law phenomenon of heaven and earth, the blade that broke the formation condensed. The sharp shadow shone in midair and condensed into a dazzling crescent moon. The clouds parted and the moon shone brightly. This blade technique displayed the sharpness of the blade path to its pinnacle. In the past, it had slaughtered countless Daoist martial immortals. slashing the physical body, unstoppable. When Chu Xiu displayed the starting stance of this blade technique, the primordial spirit's expression changed completely. He was a natural creation, so his spiritual senses were exceptionally sensitive. When Chu Xiu displayed the starting stance, the primordial spirit could feel the terrifying power. It was an ultimate power that could end him. Gods didn't have emotions, but the primordial spirit did. After the primordial god palace had given him true spiritual intelligence, it had wanted to make him a god. However, it had also given him human emotions. Most of the time, he appeared indifferent, but in reality, he also had human emotions. There was anger, and there was also fear. Between life and death, there was great fear. This was human instinct. The primordial spirit considered himself a god, but he couldn't avoid it. Hence, when Chu Xiu displayed the starting stance, the primordial spirit didn't have time to care about the third eye. He only had one thought in his mind. Run. Chapter 1407. Under the clear sky illuminating shadow, no one could escape or hide. They could only rely on their physical strength to resist and resist. Among all the opponents that Chu Xiu had faced before, only a handful of them could escape from the clear sky illuminating shadow. Although Jun Wuxian could resist the clear sky illuminating shadow, his body was destroyed, leaving only his primordial spirit. At this moment, under Chu Xiu's clear sky illuminating shadow, the original god felt an extremely sharp force tearing his body. It was a force that made people feel hopeless. They could only resist it, but they couldn't resist it because they couldn't find the source of that force. Although the original god's body was as strong as an ancient Demogorgon's, he couldn't resist the pulling force of the clear sky illuminating shadow. His perfect body was bleeding. The original god roared angrily. The energy around him affected the rules of heaven and earth. The yin and yang energy in his eyes and the two horns on his head assimilated all the rules around him and fused them into his body. However, he still couldn't resist the power of the clear sky illuminating shadow. The original god gritted his teeth and changed his strategy. He didn't think about resisting anymore, but used this force to repair his body. The clear sky illuminating shadow tore a wound, and this force repaired it. However, it was a pity that the healing power couldn't compare to the destructive power. More and more wounds appeared on the original god's body. In the end, his entire body was covered with small wounds. His entire body was like a broken piece of porcelain, which looked extremely pitiful. At the moment the original god was ready to give up the two horns on his head and use the yin and yang qi, which was close to the origin, to repair his body, the dark clouds in the sky covered the sharp moon in the sky. The dark clouds covered the moon, and the light was restrained. It was Chu Xiu who had forcefully stopped the clear sky illuminating shadow. Of course, Chu Xiu didn't mean to let the original god go. He didn't have the fetish of protecting rare animals. However, if Chu Xiu forcefully used the clear sky reflecting shadow to the end and used all of its power, the original god's body would be torn apart. Chu Xiu would also be severely injured by the backlash of the supernatural power. Although the clear sky illuminating shadow was strong, the backlash was too strong. It was like a double-edged sword. In this situation, Lu Fengxian and the other two could only barely hold back Monk Longtu. Although Zen Master Ji Kong and the others were not their main enemies, they were definitely not friends either. Therefore, at this time, Chu Xiu must not be injured, at least not in front of them. Originally, once the clear sky illuminating shadow was cast, it could not be retracted. However, now that Chu Xiu was using the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth to cast the clear sky illuminating shadow, in addition to the great improvement in his abilities, his control over his strength had also increased. Thus, he was able to forcefully retract the clear sky illuminating shadow which he had cast halfway. After letting out a long breath and calming his body, Chu Xiu stopped using the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. He took a step forward and held the third eye in his hand. At this time, the original god was covered in wounds and blood. He didn't dare to stop Chu Xiu and could only let Chu Xiu hold the third eye in his hand. The third eye was extremely strange. The yin and yang energy and even a chaotic energy kept surging and fermenting, trying to break free from Chu Xiu. It didn't have any intelligence, but it had an instinct. It seemed like it didn't want to be controlled by any existence. In the past, when the original God Palace had created it, it had been too perfect. As a result, the original God couldn't assimilate it. At this moment, the yin and yang origin in Chu Xiu's body suddenly released a faint aura. It didn't affect Chu Xiu at all, but it completely shocked the third eye, allowing it to stabilize in Chu Xiu's hand. Seeing Chu Xiu keep the third eye calmly and look at him, Monk Longtu knew that something was wrong. Chu Xiu stared at him with a faint smile and said, "You are very strange. You are different from all the others I have seen before. I have seen the Iron Emperor Castle Lord, the previous Drifting Snow City Lord of the Extreme North, and the previous Celestial Master of the Celestial Master Abode. You are different from them. You seem to have retained your consciousness. They have all turned into ashes. What about you? 500 years ago, you died once. Are you afraid of dying a second time? Tell me, what is going on with you? What is that person from the Yellow Springs Heaven planning? If you don't tell me, I will turn you into ashes like those things." Monk Longtu's expression changed. He didn't expect that Chu Xiu had already discovered all this. However, he then laughed loudly and said, "Do you think you have one?" As soon as he said this, he turned his gaze to Su Yun and said in a low voice, "You are a junior of my Great Light Temple? Looking at your strength, you are even stronger than me 500 years ago. Not bad at all. Attack now and kill them all together." Su Yun said awkwardly, "Ancestral Master, only we are disciples of the Great Light Temple. The others are martial artists of the Upper World Celestial Treasure Temple. Your disciples are unworthy. Now that the Great Light Temple has been destroyed by Chu Xiu, we can only lead our remaining members to join the Celestial Treasure Temple in order to survive and inherit." When Monk Longtu heard this, he didn't seem to care about the Great Light Temple being destroyed. He said to the people of the Celestial Treasure Temple, "Since you are also people of my Buddhist sect, help me this time. I will repay you generously in the future." Ji Kong frowned and said, "Repay you generously? What I am even more curious about is who are you? The dead from 500 years ago have been resurrected. Are you still the person from 500 years ago? Or rather, who is the person behind you?" A strange smile appeared on Monk Longtu's lips. "Everyone, you will have the chance to find out who I am and who is behind me in the future. But now, are you sure you don't want to help? I know why you came to the 10,000 Buddha Palace. It is definitely not just for the books of the past. When I came to the original God Palace, I actually went to the 10,000 Buddha Palace and saw that person. I also reinforced the seal that was about to loosen. If you are willing to help me this time, I will hand the seal over to you. If you don't help me, I will let it out. By then, it will be enough to embarrass you and give you a headache." Ji Kong seemed to know what the other party was talking about. His expression changed and he shouted, "Impossible. 10,000 years have passed. How can it still be alive? Even if it is alive, does it still have intelligence?" Monk Longtu grinned. "Even the dead can be resurrected. What's so strange about that kind of existence living for 10,000 years? Moreover, it is not considered a human. As long as the evil thoughts of heaven and earth are not eliminated and the heart demon is not extinguished, it will continue to exist." Chu Xiu did not know what Longtu was talking about. However, he only knew that if he continued, Ji Kong and the others would probably be persuaded by him. Since the other party did not intend to surrender, he would forcefully capture him. Without saying a word, Chu Xiu took a step forward and rushed toward Monk Longtu. At the same time, he slashed down and an invisible blade light instantly enveloped Longtu. However, at that moment, Ji Kong suddenly made a move. The Kitagarbha Bodhisattva's dharmic image rose up, suppressing the surroundings and enveloping Longtu within it. The blade intent collided with the Ksitagarbha Dharma idol. In an instant, the blade energy and Buddha light scattered in all directions and even shattered the surrounding space. At the same time that he blocked Chu Xiu's attack, Ji Kong said in a deep voice, "Cult Master Chu, can you give face to Heaven Luo Temple and let us deal with this person?" Chu Xiu snorted coldly. "Your Heaven Luo Temple doesn't even know what kind of existence he is, yet you still want to cause trouble." Ji Kong said in a deep voice, "It is precisely because I don't know that I am prepared to bring him back to Heaven Luo Temple to interrogate him carefully." At that moment, Monk Longtu also realized that something was wrong. He had overestimated the strength of Heaven Luo Temple's group. Facing Chu Xiu, they actually did not dare to attack and even tried to get him to give them face. Hence, Longtu secretly drew an arrayed disc in his hand. While the two of them were talking, the arrayed disc had already begun to operate. Sensing the energy fluctuations, Chu Xiu suddenly looked at Monk Longtu. He had already slashed out with the breaking array in his hand, but it was already too late. The original God Palace and the Million Buddha Palace were completely entangled. The moment Monk Longtu activated the array formation, the entire Million Buddha Palace began to shake violently. Boundless sinister demonic energy surged violently, causing the entire space within the ruins to tremble. The entire Million Buddha Palace was completely shattered. A figure shrouded in black evil devil chi stepped out of the ruins and appeared in front of everyone. It was a monk, a tall and strong young monk. His entire body was covered in black devil chi, but what he emitted was not devil chi. Instead, it was an extremely sinister ghost chi. In Chu Xiu's perception, he did not seem to have a physical body, yet he seemed to have one. The most important thing was his eyes. They were formed by countless evil thoughts. If one looked at them, it would affect the state of mind of a person who wasn't mentally strong. Compared to the existence in front of him, the original God created by humans could not be considered a human, but it was more like a human than the existence in front of him. What is this thing? Chu Xiu looked at Ji Kong. However, Zen Master Ji Kong's face was livid, and he did not say a word. Monk Longtu laughed. "If you don't say it, I'll say it for you." He was the founder of the Million Buddha Palace, the first holy monk Tanzong, who was recognized by hundreds of Buddhist sects, including the Tianluo Treasure Temple, 10,000 years ago. Humans have 7 emotions: greed, anger, obsession, hate, love, evil, and desire. There are also 8 sufferings: birth, aging, illness, death, separation from love, long-lasting resentment, unattainable desires, and inability to let go. In the past, Tanzong claimed to have cut off all his desires and became the first holy monk that no one has ever done. He even helped countless monks, including the patriarch of the Tianluo Treasure Temple, to get rid of evil thoughts and calm their minds. However, how could the so-called evil thoughts and desires be so easily eradicated? Tanzong had only cut off a part of his primordial spirit and cultivated it into an independent primordial spirit to carry his evil thoughts and desires. This part of the primordial spirit had even absorbed the evil thoughts and emotions of countless Buddhist monks. After Tanzong died, he replaced Tanzong and became a devil that gathered countless evil thoughts. 10,000 years ago, after Tanzong died, he was released. That was equivalent to the arrival of a great calamity, and the entire martial world was littered with corpses. Now, his power has not fully recovered, so you guys have to be careful. If you let him go out and cause trouble in the martial world again, it will be the karma of your Tianluo Treasure Temple. Chapter 1408. Tanzong was already dead, but this evil thought was formed from Tanzong's primordial spirit. Everything was caused by him, so it wasn't strange that it was him. And most importantly, Tan Zong clearly knew that if he died, he wouldn't be able to suppress the evil thoughts that had already taken shape. The other party would definitely bring chaos to the entire pugilistic world. In the end, he didn't say anything to anyone. This #1 holy monk in the history of 10,000 years ago was the standard. After I die, who cares if the flood overflows the sky? Maybe even at the very last moment, his evil thought wasn't completely eradicated. Ji Kong's face was completely black. They knew about Tan Zong's evil thought. This time, they chose to find the 1000 Buddha Palace. One of the reasons was naturally to find the scriptures inside, but at the same time, they wanted to seal Tan Zong's evil thought again. The Buddhist lineage valued karma the most. In the past, their heavenly Luo treasure temple had a deep relationship with Tan Zong. The one who sealed Tan Zong's evil thought was also the heavenly Luo treasure temple. Later on, the entire heavenly Luo treasure temple left the lower realm and came to the Daoist continent. But now that they were back, if they didn't do anything and allowed Tan Zong's evil thought to bring chaos to the world, then all the karma would be on heavenly Luo treasure temple. Also, Tan Zong's evil thought wasn't just a mindless ghost. The other party's foundation was part of Tan Zong's primordial spirit. He naturally knew who took the lead to seal him for 10,000 years. At this moment, he had just broken free and felt the aura of the heavenly Luo treasure temple martial artist. That endless evil thought was already staring at them. Lanta pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "Stop him as well. My master promised that as long as you are willing to submit, he will repair the part of your primordial spirit you lost. Of course, we have to wait until he returns." Tan Zong's evil thought looked at Lantu. He didn't open his mouth, but his thunderous voice resounded throughout the world. "If you lie to me, I will make sure you won't even be able to die." Lanta said indifferently, "My master is a man of his word. He won't lie to you. You aren't qualified for him to lie to you." With that, the evil spirit of Tan Zong suddenly turned his gaze towards Chu Xiu and Ji Kong. He opened his mouth and let out an angry roar. In an instant, endless evil spirit energy filled the entire space and shrouded them. Tan Zong's evil will actually displayed the strength of the 8th heavenly layer. Even though he had been sealed for 10,000 years, he could still display the cultivation of the 8th heavenly layer. On Lungtu's side, he waved his hand and brought along the original spirit that was heavily injured by the clear sky reflecting shadow. They escaped through the crack that Tan Sect's evil intent had opened. Chu Xiu didn't waste any effort to chase after him because he couldn't catch up with him anymore. In the face of an opponent with the strength of the 8th layer, the opponent would not give him this opportunity. Chu Xiu said to Jikong expressionlessly, "Master Jikong, are you satisfied now? If you didn't stop me just now and let me capture him, how could there be so many problems now?" Ji Kong retorted, "I also want to capture the other party. Anyway, I'm going to capture him, so it doesn't matter who makes the move. You insist on fighting with me, could it be that you have some shameful secret?" The two of them exchanged a few words, then didn't continue speaking and faced Tan Zong's evil will. This thing had locked onto all of them at the same time, and even enveloped the entire area of the ruins within its range of power. This power was simply terrifying. Tan Zong's evil will formed a Buddhist seal, but attentive people would have already noticed that every seal he formed was in the opposite direction. In the next moment, a Vairocana Dharma that was burning with pitch-black flames appeared behind him. To be more accurate, it wasn't Vairocana, but Vairocana Dharma. The Dharma's dignified face was now filled with malevolence. Thousands of arms appeared behind the Dharma's back and smashed towards the people below. That power contained the extremely powerful power of nirvanic destruction, as if all the emotions in the world were fused within it. Although Chu Xiu also cultivated the demonic path, the power of Tan Zong's evil will wasn't considered demonic, but pure evil, a type of evil that was displayed to the extreme. "Stand behind me!" Chu Xiu shouted at Lu Fengxian and the others. When facing Longtu, they could still hold him back if they worked together. But facing this Tan Zong's evil will, which was comparable to the 8th celestial layer, Lu Fengxian, who had just stepped into the martial immortal realm, would be heavily injured if she took one of its attacks. Forming the lotus cross seal, endless light blossomed in front of Chu Xiu, shattering the Vairocana Dharma's arms one by one. However, at the same time, he had to endure the powerful attacks. Zen Master Ji Kong also raised his Ksitigarbha Dharma to the peak, helping the disciples of the Heaven Luo Treasure Temple. Actually, with their strength, it was a simple matter for them to escape from the enemy's hands. However, they had disciples on the side. How could they abandon them and escape by themselves? Zen Master Ji Kong gritted his teeth and said to Chu Xiu, "Official Chu, at a time like this, let's not complain about whose fault it is. What's important is to first get rid of this Tan Zong's evil will. You haven't used up the blade you used to kill the primordial god, right? I know that after you use that blade, it will cause a powerful backlash. After you use it, I will protect you. I swear to Buddha that I won't hit you when you're down. If I have any evil thoughts, I am willing to fall into samsara forever and never be able to transcend." Ordinary monks rarely made such a vow because it would affect their state of mind and the karma that existed in the unseen world. Now that Zen Master Ji Kong said this, it seemed like he was sincere about cooperating with Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu spread his hands and said helplessly, "Even if I use clear sky reflecting shadow, it's futile. If I'm not wrong, this Tan Zong's evil will doesn't have a physical body. His current state should be a kind of primordial spirit body. It's a kind of power formed by countless evil thoughts eroding the primordial spirit. Don't care what this power is, it doesn't have a physical body anyway. Clear sky reflecting shadow can only cut the physical body, it's not lethal to the primordial spirit. After one blade, I'll be crippled, but he probably won't be affected much." At this moment, the Tan Zong's evil will began to recite scriptures, but it was the kind that no one could understand. Every word that came out would make everyone's heart tremble and feel very stifled. As the scriptures were recited, all the rules in the ruins were repelled, as if it had become a world that belonged to him alone. Ji Kong's expression changed. The power of the Tan Zong's evil will doesn't come from his body, but from his power. It's the extreme negative emotions of heaven and earth. It can even infect the world and repel the rules. If it's used on a person, it can even completely destroy their state of mind. If this continues, when this world completely becomes his, none of us will be able to leave. Seeing that Chu Xiu didn't seem to be in a hurry and didn't make any movements, Ji Kong couldn't care so much anymore. He didn't know if Chu Xiu was telling the truth when he said that clear sky reflecting shadow was useless, but in this situation, if Chu Xiu wasn't going to risk his life, then he would have to. Ji Kong sighed and took a step forward. The golden Buddhist light around him started to dissipate. At the same time, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Dharma idol behind him also started to recite the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Dharma idol. Traces of Buddhist light were emitted from the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Dharma idol. In the end, it was as if the entire Dharma idol was burning. The Ksitigarbha Dharma idol became smaller and smaller, and the burning became more and more intense. In the end, it even lit up the entire space, completely suppressing the power of the Tan Zong's evil will to a radius of 10 meters around him. Until hell is empty, I vow not to become a Buddha. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was a powerful existence that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Buddha. Zen Master Ji Kong cultivated in Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Perhaps he didn't show it normally, but at this moment, when he used his full strength, the powerful might shook the netherworld. The majestic Buddhist light suppressed the Tan Zong's evil will and propped up a bright place in the dark night. The Tan Zong's evil will looked at Ji Kong with a sinister smile. Heaven Luo Treasure Temple, Ksitigarbha Pavilion? Back then, the head of your Ksitigarbha Pavilion had his neck twisted by me. Until hell is empty, I vow not to become a Buddha. If you can't even become a Buddha, what's the point of saying all that nonsense? As the Tan Zong's evil will's voice fell, countless black gas surrounded him and condensed into a huge swastika. However, it was an inverted swastika, emitting the most evil negative energy in the world. The inverted swastika suppressed the Ksitigarbha golden light. To be precise, this wasn't suppression, but a kind of assimilation. The Tan Zong's evil will's power came from the heaven and earth. In fact, it was a kind of negative energy gathered by all living beings in this world. As long as the evil will existed in this world, the Tan Zong's evil will's power wouldn't be extinguished. Even his body wasn't indestructible. Therefore, the Ksitigarbha golden light was slowly being eroded and assimilated. One side was getting stronger and the other side was getting weaker. Against an enemy like the Tan Zong's evil will, the most taboo thing was to get entangled in a fight. At this moment, Chu Xiu finally made his move. If they didn't get rid of this thing, none of them would be able to leave. His hands formed a seal and the power of creation activated the yin and yang in his body. In an instant, the majestic yin and yang energy filled Chu Xiu's body, causing him to groan. At this moment, Chu Xiu's body had already turned into yin and yang. As he clasped his hands together, yang was above and yin was below. He clasped his hands together and twisted. The yin and yang energy combined and affected the entire heaven and earth. In an instant, heaven and earth became one and intertwined. It was like a huge millstone, completely crushing everything and recreating the chaos. Heaven and earth millstone. This move required Chu Xiu to draw upon the origin energy within his body in order to execute it, and he had only used it once when he faced Yi Weikong in the past. After using the clear sky illuminating shadow, Chu Xiu could roughly estimate the strength of the backlash. However, Chu Xiu wasn't sure how strong the backlash would be after using the heaven and earth millstone. Therefore, from then on, Chu Xiu hadn't used it even once. This time, against the Tan Zong's evil will, even the clear sky illuminating shadow was useless. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only use the heaven and earth millstone. It didn't matter if it was a positive or negative energy. Everything, including the ruins, the original God Palace, the Thousand Buddha Palace, and the small world that contained the ruins, was directly crushed by Chu Xiu's heaven and earth millstone. Chapter 1409. The clear sky illuminating shadow could not slash the body of an essence spirit, but the worldly millstone could crush any existence between heaven and earth. When Ji Kong saw Chu Xiu's worldly millstone, his eyes were filled with deep fear and even a trace of fear. Although the precious Buddha of heaven and earth had worked together with Chu Xiu in the Daoist, they had acted separately, so they had not truly seen Chu Xiu's strength. Ji Kong had interacted with Chu Xiu many times. Ever since the establishment of the Kunlun devil cult, he had been in contact with Chu Xiu. Every time Chu Xiu revealed his battle prowess, he would be incomparably horrified. When the worldly millstone was used, Ji Kong only had one thought. If he were to face this move, he would probably be killed on the spot. The small world that the ruins were in directly exploded. The powerful force even made Chu Xiu, who had used the worldly millstone, a little unsteady. Retreat! Chu Xiu shouted in a low voice. LV Fengxian immediately pulled Chu Xiu, who had exhausted all of his strength, and followed the others to escape from this destroyed world. This time, it was much better to use the worldly millstone than when he had used it against Yi Weikong. At the very least, Chu Xiu hadn't been seriously injured by the backlash this time. He had only exhausted his strength. Of course, if he could control the source of the yin and yang forces more precisely, he might be able to save some power and not let it all pour out. The power brought about by the destruction of the small world took a full hour to completely dissipate. Zen Master Ji Kong had also escaped with the people from the precious Buddha of heaven and earth. He let out a long breath and asked, "Where's the Tan sect's evil intent? Is he dead?" Chu Xiu shook his head. "I don't know. He can no longer be considered human, so I can't feel his vitality. He might be dead, he might still be alive, or he might be alive in a different state. Zen Master Ji Kong looked at the destroyed pocket world and couldn't help but smile bitterly. He was somewhat at a loss. They were here to search for some ancient records left behind in the Thousand Buddha Palace, as well as to reinforce the seal on Tan sect's evil thoughts. In the end, the evil thoughts of Tan sect were released and the 10,000 Buddha Palace was completely destroyed. The Tian Luo treasure Dharma's mission this time was simply executed in pieces by him. The root of all this was not Chu Xiu, but Venerable Longtu from 500 years ago. Ji Kong didn't know what was going on. He could only ask Chu Xiu. His intuition told him that Chu Xiu definitely knew the truth. Cult Master Chu, it's already come to this. Aren't you going to tell us what's going on with Monk Lantu? Chu Xiu said indifferently, if I knew what was going on, would I have brought so few people and been caught off guard? If I knew what was going on, I would have brought all my subordinates and sealed the entire pocket world. Who cares if it's an original god or Tan sect's evil thoughts, no one would be able to escape. Zen Master Ji Kong, there are some things that you should know, and it's useless to force what you shouldn't know. I've used up too much energy, so I'm going back to recuperate. Of course, if Zen Master Ji Kong is interested, I'm willing to fight with you again. After saying that, Chu Xiu left with his people. Zen Master Ji Kong was stunned, but in the end, he just sighed and didn't say anything. Just now, he used Ksitigarbha's Light of Buddha to resist the attack of Tan sect's evil thoughts. He had also used up a lot of energy. Moreover, his subordinates weren't as strong as the experts from the Kunlun devil cult under Chu Xiu. He couldn't beat them, so he could only give up. Let's go. We should also return to Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple and tell Chief Ji Shan about this matter. When Ji Kong returned with his people, he didn't notice that Su Yun's body suddenly paused. His eyes were instantly filled with darkness, but in the next moment, it disappeared. He followed Ji Kong back to Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple like a normal person. Ji Kong and the others returned empty-handed, but Chu Xiu didn't return empty-handed. At least, the third eye made by the original God Palace was in his hands. After returning to the southern sub-palace, Chu Xiu had been studying this thing. From the outside, this so-called third eye was like a gem that contained the power of yin and yang. It also contained a trace of chaotic force. However, the power was too pure. Chu Xiu didn't know how to refine it because he couldn't absorb it at all. Previously, the original god put this thing between his eyebrows, but it didn't seem to be refined. It was just hidden in his flesh. Chu Xiu knocked his head and suddenly had a bold idea. People without strength having bold ideas were called courting death. People with strength had the courage to try. Chu Xiu felt that he belonged to the latter group. In the seclusion secret room, Chu Xiu directly used the power of creation to trigger the yin and yang in his body and condensed it in his hands. This power was so huge that it was enough to display the earth-shattering magical power like the world millstone, but now it was held in Chu Xiu's hands. It was equivalent to holding two storms that could completely destroy the entire southern Man sub-palace. The two groups of yin and yang origin poured into the third eye. In an instant, the third eye bloomed with a dazzling brilliance. The brilliance was divided into two colors, yin and yang. Under the blessing of the yin and yang origin power, it integrated into Chu Xiu's body. In the middle of Chu Xiu's eyebrows, there was a mark that looked like a vertical eye. The yin and yang power overflowed into the surrounding seclusion secret room. Everything it touched, including the array and the walls, turned into flying ashes. This noise alarmed the others. Everyone went out to take a look and saw Chu Xiu's current appearance. Although they didn't know what was going on, they guessed that Chu Xiu had a breakthrough again. Lu Jianghu saw that Chu Xiu had 3 eyes on his head and that his whole body was dyed black and white by the yin and yang power. He couldn't help but say, 3 eyes? A yin-yang person? Mei Qinglian looked at Lu Jianghu and shook her head. You better hope that cult master Chu didn't hear it. Chu Xiu heard Lu Jianghe's habitual mouth. However, he didn't have the time to argue with him now. This third eye was really magical. No wonder the original God Palace regarded it as the last link to create a god. This thing could be said to be perfect. It was so perfect that it didn't seem like it was created by a human. The third eye contained a portion of the yin and yang origin power. This wasn't a big deal. Other than the true yang origin and devil origin, some people who cultivated a martial path to the peak realm or found other treasures could also obtain a portion of the power that was close to the origin power. However, the origin power in the third eye could be said to be perfectly balanced. It was exactly the same as the yin and yang origin in Chu Xiu's body. Therefore, human flesh and blood couldn't refine this thing because it was too perfect. Chu Xiu didn't refine the third eye either. To be more precise, it was the yin and yang origin power that refined it. When the yin and yang light gradually disappeared, Chu Xiu had already stepped into the realm of the 6th level of the celestial realm. Of course, this wasn't what made Chu Xiu the happiest. What he should be happy about was that with this third eye, Chu Xiu could use a portion of the yin and yang origin power. It wouldn't be like when he used the heaven and earth millstone, where he always had to worry about not being able to control the power and suffering a backlash. Congratulations on your great improvement in strength. Lu Jianghe hurriedly rushed to be the first to flatter him. The others also congratulated him, but they didn't have much passion. Of course, it wasn't because they didn't respect Chu Xiu. It was because Chu Xiu broke through so frequently that they were used to it. On the contrary, if one day Chu Xiu was stuck in a realm for years or even decades without breaking through, then they would be worried that something had happened to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "All right, now isn't the time to congratulate me. I'm afraid the situation in the pugilistic world is going to change again. The Daoist lower realm isn't the beginning of a new era, it's now." Previously, the Daoist people always talked about the era of great battles and things like a new era. Although Chu Xiu had already been involved in a part of the battle for fate, he thought that it was only referring to the lower realm of the Daoist sects. Moreover, it was all caused by him. However, from the looks of it now, the so-called new era wasn't that simple. How long had the supreme heavenly devil, the primordial spirit, and the Tan sect's evil thoughts been buried in the lower realm? With Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji's strength, they might have been able to sense it. They didn't dig it up because there was no need. However, they hadn't been discovered for 10,000 years. They only appeared after the Daoist lower realm. This couldn't be described as a coincidence. It could only be said that it was an arrangement of karma and fate. If they did it once or twice, they would be able to do it again. Who knew what would appear next? Chu Xiu was wary of such an unknown existence. At the same time, he decided to take the initiative and go to the Daoist to look for the heavenly soul. The items in the original God Palace were useful to Chu Xiu. However, the items that were useless to him might be useful to others. Hence, he took the initiative to dig them up. He might even be able to exchange them for some good items. Furthermore, the arrangement of the life soul in the netherworld heaven made Chu Xiu wary. Not only were they stealing the power of the dragon vein, but they had also made arrangements in the entire lower realm. If the heavenly soul knew where the hidden items in the lower realm were, the life soul would definitely know where they were. Although Chu Xiu didn't know what the life soul was planning, as long as he destroyed the life soul's plan and didn't let the life soul get what it wanted, it would be fine. Just as Chu Xiu was heading to the Daoist lower realm, Su Yun was sitting cross-legged in a large hall in the Heaven Luo treasure temple. The surrounding lights were all extinguished. But at this time, his body was not surrounded by Buddhist light, but by layers of black qi. The black gas spiraled and finally formed a human figure that appeared in front of Su Yun. It was the appearance of Tan Zong's evil thought. However, his figure was extremely blurry. Su Yun looked at Tan Zong's evil thought and said coldly, what exactly do you want? Tan Zong's evil thought laughed softly. His voice was extremely strange. You're wrong. It's not what I want, but what you want. If you don't want it, why didn't you tell the monks in the Heaven Luo treasure temple when I possessed you? The evil thoughts in your body are the strongest among all the Buddhist monks I've seen. You and I are the same kind of people. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.